Chapter 628. After Shelton left, the president shook his head and said, "Shelton is too idealistic. I'm afraid it won't be enough for him to resign. This time he'll go to jail. Aren't you going to protect him? After all, you were the one who ordered the surveillance of Congress." The First Lady, who was wearing a business suit, walked over gracefully and asked with a smile. "But Shelton has no evidence. When we talked, we were all in our private residence." President Bush said, "Also, the prisoner abuse investigation started in 2001 and spanned my term. I wasn't the president at that time. This shows that their target was Shelton, not me. But this also reminds me that they are giving in. If I continue to protect Shelton, they will attack me and impeach me next. I can only choose to cooperate with Congress and the Supreme Court's investigation." "But how did Shelton offend Mr. Marshall?" The First Lady sipped her red wine and asked curiously. "You know, Marshall and the California Consortium were never willing to fall out with the president and cabinet." "I don't know. Marshall didn't hesitate to offend us, lose industrial interests, and lose many high-tech industry support policies just to attack Shelton. This means that they will definitely gain more benefits." President Bush shook his head with a wry smile. His gaze was long as he sighed. "But what benefits will they gain?" When Marshall submitted his resignation letter to the president, he was taken away by the federal court. He was suspected of interfering with Congress's work, abusing prisoners of war, and eavesdropping on the private information of the public. He was also the first CIA director not taken away by the Judicial Department, making history in the United States. When he was taken away, Marshall's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. But until his death, he still couldn't figure out where his opponent was and why he had such a tragic ending. Seeing this scene, many CIA and Pentagon officials shuddered and rushed to San Francisco's Deer Leap wine cellar to visit Mr. Marshall. Of course, Mr. Marshall denied manipulating Congress and the Judicial Department, but he also hinted at various subtle messages that this matter was related to the god Sidoni. But the hawkish officials of the CIA and the Department of Defense immediately understood. The many investigations against Sidoni and Zhou Xian, as well as the various funding and attack plans, came to an abrupt end. They might not be afraid of the threat of Kong Techu and the so-called other civilization. But they were afraid of the California Consortium, which was close at hand and had a lot of influence in American politics. There was no need for them to worry unnecessarily and lose their positions and freedom because of threats that might not necessarily come. "I didn't expect the president and cabinet to be so weak. The CIA's PRISM plan hasn't even been made public and they're already so scared." On Sunny Sky, Zhou Xian was talking to Mr. Marshall through the satellite phone. He slapped his thigh and laughed. "I think we should keep the PRISM plan for now." Marshall sipped his red wine and said with a smile, "Only a dagger hidden behind your back can scare people, right? Keep them. If the CIA and the Pentagon don't behave themselves, we'll release them." Zhou Xian smiled faintly and hung up the phone. He looked at the vast sea and let out a long sigh. The fleet was about to reach Singapore. When they passed by the Straits of Malacca, Zhou Xian reluctantly got off the ship and met with his loyal follower, Li Xianlong, despite all the requests from the president of Singapore. "Grandmaster Zhang, congratulations. You finally have your own territory. Master Kong controlled Marika remotely, controlled the Senate and defeated the CIA. You've shocked the world." In the presidential palace, Li Xianlong bowed deeply, his face full of respect. Beside him, Hongbone Mage, Guo Lily and the others accompanied him. "No, I just want Sidoni to be prosperous." Zhou Xian smiled faintly. "If Master Kong has any requests, I'll support you with all my might." Li Xianlong smiled. Zhou Xian nodded slightly. Li Xianlong had done well in the process of Sidoni's establishment. He had provided a lot of financial, human and material support. Singapore was also the first country in the world to recognize Sidoni's new government and establish diplomatic relations with it. After that, it was Wuxia, South Korea and Japan. Both Li Jinju and Sasaki Haisha had put in a lot of effort. After Yi Ziwei introduced the concept of Sidoni to Li Xianlong in detail, Li Xianlong was very interested. He said fawningly, "Master Kong, this longevity sanatorium is amazing. I wonder if I can get 1 or 2 permanent residency certificates for Sidoni." "Sure. Since you've entered my sect and become my disciple, you should receive my protection," Zhou Xian said with a smile. Both sides had a good chat. Suddenly Jiang Tian's phone rang. It was Qin Yang. Master, I have something to report to you. Speak. In the past 2 months, there have been ships dumping garbage at Sidoni's port. The garbage includes medical waste and nuclear waste. The pollution is very serious. Almost all the marine products have died. Some of the coastal residents have also contracted strange diseases. Qin Yang said. Beat them up. Just kill them and take their ships. What's the point of talking so much? Jiang Tian frowned. But they didn't enter the territorial waters. They're in international waters. It's the ocean currents that brought the garbage here. Qin Yang said awkwardly, it's against international law if we do it. You may be the president in the future. What do you plan to do? Jiang Tian asked with a smile. Qin Yang knew that his master was testing him, so he quickly said, in the 1960s, land-based pollution of the marine environment attracted a lot of attention from the international community. In 1972, the Stockholm Convention adopted the 7th principle of the Declaration, which clearly stated that the country should strengthen the control of land-based pollution of the marine environment, especially in closed and semi-closed waters. Today, the international legal framework to regulate land-based pollution of the marine environment has begun to take shape. The typical examples are international customary law, the United States Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Montreal Guidelines, Agenda 21, and the 1995 Global Action Plan to prevent land-based pollution of the marine environment. The agency responsible for maintaining the safety of the global marine environment is the United States Environment Program. As for this incident, I think we should first use diplomatic channels to plead with France through the United States Environment Program. We should state the facts and ask for national compensation or commercial compensation from the New World. Jiang Tian nodded and said, yes, we should use diplomatic channels to urge France to stop the invasion and warn them that we may start a war. If France stops the invasion, admits its mistake and agrees to pay compensation and pollution control, then forget it. After all, we're a peace-loving country. Who doesn't make mistakes? If they don't agree, then we'll dig up all the garbage and dump it on the French territorial waters. Or directly into the Buckingham Palace. Qin Yang, you'll be responsible for this. Yes, master, I understand. Qin Yang immediately took action. Jiang Tian hung up the phone and said goodbye to Li Xianlong. He flew to Sidoni with Qing'er. The Sky Troop fleet was protected by Wuxia warships and they were well armed. Except for the fleets of the 5 superpowers, no one dared to provoke them. Therefore Jiang Tian was quite assured. Do you feel like you're flying? Jiang Tian sat cross-legged on the flying sword, holding Zhou Xian's slender waist, and asked with a smile. Speaking of which, this was the first time the couple shared a flying sword after Blackie's flying sword was refined. In fact, Qing'er's flying sword had been refined. It was refined with Zeus's scepter, but Jiang Tian felt that it was more comfortable for the two of them to share a flying sword. Well, it feels good. Especially for this kind of long-distance flight. Where are we going? Zhou Xian smiled and said. To Xanadu. Jiang Tian smiled and said. Do you have to be so dramatic? Qing'er said coquettishly. Sidoni has already built it very well. The Taichu Sect's training ground on Tianqing Mountain has a beautiful environment and abundant spirit qi. There are no mortal disturbances, so we can focus on cultivation. If this is not Xanadu, what is it? Jiang Tian said seriously. This is indeed Xanadu, but that's the past. From now on, this is the Black Skeleton Dump. In the waters north of Sidoni, a cruiser cruised slowly as if it was its own home. A tall and mighty one-eyed soldier stood on the deck with his hands on his hips, laughing sinisterly. Above his head, a blood-red flag fluttered in the wind. On it was a black skull with blood oozing out of its eye sockets. It opened its bloody mouth as if it was about to swallow someone whole. If an international fishing boat were to see this, they would probably have to avoid it and be terrified. This was because this was the infamous Black Mamba mercenary group. The Black Mamba mercenary group was registered in France, but they had operations all over the world. They had tens of thousands of members and were equipped with all kinds of advanced weapons. They even had 7 or 8 cruisers. They had a long history that could even be traced back to the East India Company. In terms of strength, the Black Skeleton was on par with the Russian Polar Bear mercenary group, second only to the Blackwater mercenary group in South Africa. Colonel Dixon, Thank you for personally escorting and protecting the New World Renewable Energy Company. These Sidoni pirates are so annoying. An old man wearing a silk shirt and a red bow tie walked out with 2 glasses of red wine in his hand and said with a smile. This old man had a head full of silver hair, like an old gentleman in the French countryside. His smile was kind, elegant, and extraordinary. Although Dixon was the chief instructor and commander-in-chief of the Black Skeleton, he preferred to be called Colonel Dixon by his military rank in the French Royal Navy. Wilson knew this very well. Sir Wilson, don't worry. With the Black Skeleton, no one from Sidoni would dare to offend you. They are just a bunch of uncivilized black monkeys. This is a no man's land. Colonel Dixon took the glass and took a sip, enjoying the Atlantic Ocean monsoon as he smiled proudly. Of course, the service of the Black Skeleton is undoubtedly excellent. I'm glad to have a partner like you. Wilson smiled and raised his glass. Colonel Dixon raised his glass, but his face was instantly covered with a layer of sadness. But as you know, Sidoni has recently formed a new government. This is no longer the world of my old comrade, Kuba. A fierce look flashed across his only eye as he said in a deep voice, when he was around he let us do whatever we wanted. But now we might still encounter resistance. So, I want to increase the reward to 10 million USD per escort. Chapter 629. Colonel Dixon, friendship is friendship, business is business. The remuneration of 5 million USD for each voyage is something we've discussed. Wilson shook his head helplessly and said, I'm afraid I can't comply. Our profits are limited and 5 million is already the limit we can afford. Honorable Sir Wilson, Colonel Dixon held the railing and sneered, do you think I don't know your profits? Your partners are Glaxo and more than a dozen pharmaceutical giants as well as many nuclear power plants. And every time you dispose of the garbage, the remuneration you receive from the pharmaceutical giants and nuclear power plants, as well as the government's rewards, exceed 100 million USD. But what about your cost? It's just a few ships. I'm afraid it's less than 1 million USD. This is a profitable business. What about us? You know there are more than 300 soldiers and sailors on this ship. They have to go through more than 10 days of arduous sailing facing tropical storms and other bad weather, as well as the abominable Sidoni pirates. They're exchanging their lives for money, but the remuneration is only a few thousand USD. Colonel Dixon, as expected of someone who spent time in the French Marine Corps. I can't hide anything from you. Wilson smiled bitterly and helplessly, but the New World Renewable Energy Company doesn't belong to me alone. There are many shareholders. I'm afraid your proposal won't pass the board of directors. They'll pass. You won't find a better partner in France or even in the world. Dixon smiled domineeringly. Also, you can tell those old fogies that if they don't agree, I'll expose it to the BBC. I think they'll be very interested in these dirty tricks. You'll announce internationally that these pollution sources have been disposed of by you with high technology and a lot of money. In fact, you're just treating Sidoni's North Bay as a garbage dump and dumping it here without any treatment. And this garbage is all toxic medical waste. What's even more terrifying is nuclear waste. Colonel Dixon, you're destroying the friendship and trust we've built with great difficulty. Wilson's face stiffened and he was furious, but the good upbringing of a French gentleman allowed him to suppress his anger. No, on the contrary, I've always cherished my friendship with Sir Wilson, Colonel Dixon said with a lazy smile. If you can help me achieve my goal, I'll give you 1 million USD for every escort. My understanding of friendship is very simple. It's to give a friend the greatest benefits. What do you think? Butcher. What a butcher. What an unpredictable guy. Wilson cursed inwardly. But he could only raise his goblet and say seriously, well then let's toast to our friendship. Crush. In front of them, more than a dozen large garbage ships had their boards opened, revealing piles of stinky garbage. Several large excavators were activated. The mechanical arms that were more than 10 meters long twisted, and the huge bucket dumped piles of garbage that had been simply packed into the blue sea water. Only a few minutes later, a layer of colorful garbage floated on the surface of the sea within a radius of over 10 miles. Disposable medical supplies, gauze stained with blood, expired drugs, yellow nuclear waste and black oil stains of unknown composition. The clear blue seawater had already turned black, and the waves became smooth and powerless under the pressure of the viscous oil film. Half an hour later, Garbage and sewage flowed along the ocean current into Sidoni's territorial waters and coastal areas. The beach, which had been full of vitality and grass, was now covered by a layer of black oil and garbage. Fish that had died due to lack of oxygen floated on the surface. Their gradually grayish-white eyes stared at the sky in despair. Seagulls and all kinds of waterfowl struggled in the oil stains. They were like black sculptures made of asphalt. Only their eyes could prove that they were living creatures. They're here again. Oh my God, these despicable devils. At this moment, dozens of Sidoni natives from nearby tribes appeared on the beach. They were skinny and scantily clad. They cursed the distant ships in their native language and fished out the seabirds with tears in their eyes. They soaked the waterfowl in detergent, trying to wash off the oil stains on their bodies. But it was very difficult. The oil and feathers stuck together tightly. With just a little bit of force, the feathers fell off along with the oil stains. Most of these waterfowl died. A few skinny black men with bare backs, wearing flowery pants and slippers and carrying old-fashioned rifles, danced angrily, shouting and cursing. Some fired at Dixon's fleet. But the distance between the two sides was more than 10 nautical miles, far beyond the range of rifles. The bullets fell powerlessly into the endless sea less than 1,000 meters away. They did not cause any waves, nor could they hurt Colonel Dixon and the others. No one paid attention to them at all. The garbage continued to be dumped. The surface of the sea was filled with garbage and dead tuna, lobsters and prawns, emitting a strong stench. Fuck the oil. Fuck the oil, it's hot. The Black brothers were furious. They expressed their anger in the simplest English. This is the third time this month. A skinny child about 13 or 14 years old hugged a dead seabird and cried helplessly. Every time he wiped his tears, a large amount of dirt would be left on his face. He was covered in poisonous sores that flowed with thick water. This was because the seawater had polluted his drinking water and food, causing him to be infected with many strange diseases. But compared to the physical pain, the helplessness and pain of watching the offshore sea, which was originally used as a granary, be polluted was even more heart-wrenching. Babilu, are you willing to fight with us? An old man with a head full of white hair stroked his head kindly. It seemed that he was also a tribal chief or something like that. Grandpa Simba, I'm willing. I'm going to kill them. Babilu clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. The glorious Sidoni pirates were going to fight them to the death. Protect our territorial waters and granaries. Children of Sidoni, move. We want to protect our suffering motherland. The beginning will protect us. Simba raised his arms and shouted. As soon as he gave the order, everyone immediately started to move. The black youths picked up a few rubber boats covered with plastic tape from the woods and put them into the water. They jumped on and paddled with all their might. Babilu held an ancient book with a portrait of Jiang Tian printed on the cover, raised a tattered national flag and stood straight at the head of the leading rubber boat. The black people had not eaten for many days. Their faces were dark and their bodies were thin. Their physiques were very weak. After paddling for a while, they were panting and bean-sized beads of sweat oozed out of their dark skin. Their heartbeats were speeding up and they slowly felt a sharp pain. Their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. But they did not slack off and paddled with all their might. The two rubber boats broke through two white waves on the calm sea, and they could even make the tattered national flag flutter in the wind. They did not say a word and stared at the ship that splashed the garbage. They panted and paddled with all their might. Every time they paddled, the rubber boats broke through the waves and rushed forward more than 10 meters. Their movements were precise and uniform, like a program that entered an endless loop like tireless machines. In the vast and boundless sea, their small rubber dinghies were so small that they were even smaller than an ant. The spaceship, which was full of garbage, did not speed up or slow down. It slowly operated according to the established procedures. Piles of poisonous and stinking medical garbage fell into the calm seawater. The black people continued to paddle. The anemia caused by the lack of oxygen had turned the world into a black fog in their eyes. Children, can't you take it anymore? Simba asked in a deep voice. Do you feel that the fire in your heart is about to be extinguished? He revealed a fatherly smile. If you don't want to be extinguished, then ignite yourself in the name of Tai Chu. In the name of Tai Chu, ignite us. The black people shouted, feeling the blood in their bodies burning. Grandpa Simba also picked up the paddle and paddled with all his might. He roared to the sky, Although we will die, we have to let them see our stance. We are not afraid of death. Although they were fully mentally prepared, they still froze when they rushed into the fleet. The rubber boats only glided forward mechanically under inertia. The French ships were too big, bigger than many mountains they had seen before. The setting sun plated a layer of gold on the huge fleet. Surrounded by the fleet, the black people seemed to be moving in an isolated basin. In this desolate world, only the sound of their paddles echoed. After fainting from the shock, Simba tried his best to calm himself down. He pointed at a ship that was dumping garbage and said in a deep voice, "Children, we're in range. Fire." Bang, bang, bang. The black brothers poured their bullets out to their heart's content. The bullets did not leave any obvious marks on the ship's hull. All the ships were as steady as a rock. They were like tigers looking down on ants. They arrogantly remained motionless and continued to dump garbage. "Pull away and shoot their people," Grandpa Simba ordered. The rubber boats quickly retreated and pulled away from the ships. Grandpa Simba's thin body straightened. He picked up the rifle and narrowed his eyes to aim. Pop! A New World staff member fell into a pool of blood. The crew was in chaos as they reported the information to Colonel Dixon. Colonel Dixon immediately took measures. It was like a lion being stung by a lowly ant. Although it did not hurt his muscles and bones, it only made him slightly angry. However, he still used the lightest measure to eliminate these ants. Boom! Under Dixon's command, a ship suddenly turned sideways and a mountain-like wave formed. The huge waves that blotted out the sky and covered the earth instantly overturned several rubber dinghies. Simba and the others were swept into the deep sea. 3 black brothers suffocated to death and their bodies sank to the bottom of the sea. Chapter 630. A few other black men relied on their extraordinary swimming skills to rush out of the sea. However, the rubber boat had already been washed out by the waves for more than 1,000 meters. They swam desperately towards the rubber boat. When the black men swam to the rubber boat with great difficulty, they were almost exhausted. They had just let out a cry of rescue. A rain of bullets from the long-range machine guns on the ship poured over, shattering the rubber boat. A few black men floated on the surface of the water with blood all over their bodies, instantly dyeing a large area of the sea red. The few black men who were still alive were already exhausted. Their hands slapped the surface of the water with difficulty, and they let out cries of despair. They raised their heads trying to get their faces out of the water. In the end, only round mouths were left on the surface of the water. They were wailing and crying for help. However, the Atlantic Ocean couldn't hear them. The blue sky couldn't hear them and the floating clouds couldn't hear them. Soon, another 3 black men sank to the bottom of the sea. After a while, their corpses floated above the sea. They seemed to be asleep, their eyes peaceful. The wind blew and waves of seagulls flew across the sea, but they couldn't wake them up. The New World's transport fleet continued to dump trash as if no one was around, as if they didn't care about the lives of these ants. Grandpa Simba couldn't care less about crying. He carried the blood-covered Babilu and swam desperately to the beach with the remaining 3 soldiers. All they could do was kill one of the other party's crew members, but the price was dozens of times more casualties. However, from Grandpa Simba's point of view, no matter how many casualties there were, they had to fight and not resist. In the face of invasion and humiliation, they had to fight. This was the attitude of a nation, a country, even a backward country that was in deep suffering and despair. On the ship, a gunner controlled the heavy cannon and prepared to shoot the cannonball. Dickinson raised his hand to stop him and smiled cruelly. "Don't shoot. Give them hope and then let their hope be shattered. Only then will they feel more pain." When Simba and the others swam to a nautical mile away from the coast, they were so tired that they almost fainted, but the distant beach allowed them to see the hope of victory. Simba swung his arms desperately as he shouted to encourage Babilu, "Child, don't fall asleep. Only by living can we have the hope of fighting again. Only then can we protect our suffering motherland again." Babilu's shoulder blades were pierced by bullets, revealing the white bone stubble, and blood flowed. "Grandpa, didn't you say that there's a god in Sidoni called Absolute Beginning that will protect us at all times?" Babilu said weakly with tears in his eyes. "Taichu, where are you?" Simba was speechless. He hugged his grandson and cried out to the sky. Bang bang bang. On the ship, a few cannonballs streaked across the sky, dragging long tails as they flew towards Simba and the others. Cannonballs. Simba and many of the black people on the shore and in the sea looked at the incoming cannonballs with deep despair in their eyes. Ah, ants, bugs. Colonel Dixon stood on the watchtower with binoculars in his hand, admiring the scene of the ants being crushed. At this moment, a black light flashed in the sky and disappeared. The next moment, bang. A golden light barrier opened up like a huge umbrella, covering an area of several hundred meters, blocking all 8 cannonballs. Seeing this scene, Colonel Dixon couldn't help but turn pale with fright. His eyes almost popped out. What is this? Everyone was stunned. A tall and majestic figure stood on a wide black sword and floated in the air. This person held up a huge light barrier with one hand, supporting the world and blocking the cannonballs in the sky. And under the light barrier was the pale faces of Simba and Babulu. Go to hell. Xianxia raised his eyebrows and waved his hand. 7 or 8 cannonballs suddenly turned around and shot towards the black skeleton cruiser. Close-range defense cannons. Activate. Colonel Dixon's face changed drastically as if he had seen a ghost. He screamed and almost peed on the spot. He had participated in almost all the local wars launched by France in the past 20 years. He had seen too many big scenes and could be said to be a ruthless person who walked out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. His mental fortitude was definitely top-notch. In the international mercenary world, he had the reputation of butcher. But at this moment he was really scared out of his wits. He had never seen such a divine power. With a wave of his hand he could make the cannonballs fly back. It was like a god. The ship was equipped with the Dutch-made Goalkeeper 6-barreled 30mm close-range defense cannons. The 6-meter-long barrel started to rotate rapidly. Bang, bang, bang. The dense sound of cannonballs was not a hair's breadth away. Small cannonballs were almost shot out one after another. Thousands of cannonballs interweaved into an airtight firepower net and instantly blew up the cannonballs shot by Xianxia. This was a Gatling-style rapid-fire cannon equipped with a wideband tracking radar and a day and night aiming system. The latter had a laser rangefinder with high accuracy. Its highest firing rate was 4,200 rounds per minute. Effective range was 1,220 meters, and maximum range was 3,660 meters. After testing, the Goalkeeper could destroy a T-62 tank in 2 seconds. The depleted uranium armor-piercing bullets were very powerful and could penetrate a 69mm thick steel plate at a distance of 500 meters. At this moment, Xianxia had already waved his hand, and a gentle force rolled up the few black people in the water. You are the god Tai Chu. God has descended. God Tai Chu bless Sidoni. The group of black people looked at Xianxia in awe and scrambled to kowtow. Some kept kowtowing while others raised their arms and shouted. Xianxia and Zhou Xian fed Babulu a healing pill and applied an external pill to the damaged wounds. The wounds are healed. Oh my god, they are healed. They were shocked to see. The wounds squirmed and healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It only took 10 minutes for the wounds to become as smooth as before. Tai Chu has Tao and it is with God. Tao is God. They knelt and did not get up. Their eyes were filled with reverence and devotion. They kept praying to Xianxia with solemn expressions. Seeing black skulls fleeing toward the north at full speed, Zhou Xian said, Xianxia, go get rid of them. I will take care of the black people. Want to run? Isn't it a little too late? Xianxia snorted and rode the little black flying sword. He turned into a black stream of light and chased after them at lightning speed. At this time, all the Black Skull mercenaries had been mobilized after receiving Commander Dixon's order. 3 shipborne helicopters took off and circled. All kinds of shipborne cannons were on alert. The soldiers carried heavy machine guns, sniper rifles and shoulder-mounted rocket launchers to the bunker and deck. They were on alert and ready for battle. Did Sidoni's army attack us? They must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. Behind the bunker, a white soldier named Reynolds held a thick cigar in his mouth and set up a sniper rifle. He looked at his ashen-faced comrade next to him and said in surprise, "They don't have any decent weapons. Why are you so flustered?" "No, it seems like someone blocked the cannonball with his bare hands just now." "No, to be exact, someone threw the cannonball we shot back." The soldier next to him was pale and trembling. "What a joke." The white soldier, Reynolds, laughed disdainfully. "Someone can block the cannonball and throw it back? Have you read too many Marvel comics? Yes, you must have seen wrongly. This is like a myth. Bastard. This kid is just trying to scare us. But I've seen all kinds of big scenes. The other soldiers stood on the deck and laughed, thinking that their comrade was joking and trying to scare them. A few people saw the scene just now, but most of the soldiers didn't see it clearly at all. After all, the distance was too far. Suddenly, rumble. The 3D-type Apache helicopters at the rear opened fire at the golden light flying towards them. 6 Stinger, air-to-air missiles, dragging long tails, shot out explosively. The 30mm M230 machine gun at the front turret also shot out 3 steel fire nets towards the target. The battle has begun. The enemy has entered the attack range. Some people looked very nervous. They loaded their guns and were ready to fire at any time as they looked into the distance. Although the Stinger air-to-air missiles can't attack jet fighters, they can definitely kill helicopters. Using this kind of weapon to deal with Sidoni's fighters is like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. But Reynolds and the other soldiers were disdainful, thinking that they were simply making a mountain out of a molehill. Suddenly, boom. 6 air-to-air missiles exploded in the air at the same time. D-type Apache, equipped with the most advanced thermal imaging aiming system, the hit rate is 4 times higher than the original model. The new radar can search for 128 targets at the same time, and it can intelligently identify the 16 most dangerous targets and send them to the other planes. The 3 helicopters can launch a coordinated and accurate attack within 30 seconds. The enemy must have been blown up. Just when everyone thought that they had hit the target and were cheering. Suddenly, a muffled sound like a fighter jet breaking the sound barrier was heard. An extremely bright golden light appeared in the sky, passing through the smoke and fire left by the air-to-air missiles and shooting towards them. What weapon? So fast. It's probably twice the speed of sound. Reynolds's mouth was wide open, and the cigar in his mouth instantly fell to the ground. He looked at the golden light in the distance in disbelief. When did Sidoni have a supersonic fighter jet? How can they afford it? The mercenaries were shocked and confused. The next moment, under everyone's incredulous gaze, the golden light suddenly shot out 2 black lights, one big and one small. They cut across the sky like black meteors and pierced through the 3 helicopters. Boom, boom, boom. The 3D-type Apaches quickly rose, but they did not dodge. In the blink of an eye, 3 fireworks exploded in the air. The black and red flames swirled, and pieces of wreckage fell into the sea with billowing black smoke. At this time, Xianxia was only 10 nautical miles away from them, and they could not see him clearly with the naked eye. But with high-powered military binoculars, they could vaguely see that it was not a fighter jet but a living person. It's really a person. Oh my God. Is he Superman? Reynolds and the others were shocked, dumbfounded, and dazed as if they had seen an evil spirit in broad daylight. Chapter 631. Carrier-based missiles and cannons. Fire. Dixon's exasperated roar was transmitted to the ears of every mercenary through the battlefield command system. This ship was made in the United States. Although it was not a top-tier ship, it was still very advanced. It was equipped with the Aegis air defense system and more than 30 standard missiles. In addition, the 2 cannons on the ship were equipped with a large number of 32-kilogram precision-guided shells. The cannons had a maximum range of 40 kilometers, and the air was no more than 10 meters. It could be said that the entire ship's reconnaissance, air defense and anti-ship capabilities were very strong. It was also the most powerful ship of the Black Skull mercenaries. Following Dixon's order, in an instant, thousands of cannons were fired. Missiles and cannons were shot out across the sky. The sound of the cannons was shocking and smoke filled the air. These missiles and cannons were 2 times the speed of sound, and they were only 7 or 8 nautical miles away from Xianxia. It could be said that Xianxia only had a moment to react. Missiles? Very good. I was just about to give it a try. Seeing at least 20 missiles and cannons shooting at him, Xianxia's eyes suddenly turned cold, and his divine sense moved. 2 beams of dark light shot out from the storage ring at a speed 3 times the speed of sound. Bang, bang, bang. It was like a string of firecrackers. Between Xianxia and the ship, dozens of missiles and cannons exploded in an instant. From afar, it looked like a series of dazzling fireworks were blooming continuously. However, each firework covered a radius of hundreds of meters and carried a terrifying destructive power. It should have hit. Even if he's a Blue Storm Arcanist, he can only die with regret. Seeing that the first wave of shooting was over, Colonel Dixon wiped the cold sweat on his forehead with lingering fear and looked at the miserable fireworks with his binoculars. The first wave of shooting had already fired half of the ship's cannons and missiles. With such fierce and overbearing firepower, there was no way the enemy could survive. In his opinion, even a legendary level X Arcanist or a martial arts grandmaster from Wuxia would be beaten to a pulp. But at this moment, a deputy commander exclaimed, "Colonel, the thermal imaging scope shows that the target is still alive." "What? Still alive?" Dixon was shocked and almost fell to the ground. "However, the target is retreating. It's already 20 nautical miles away." The deputy commander spoke quickly. "Retreating? He's retreating?" Dixon had a suspicious look on his face. He hadn't decided whether he should give Lin Li another round of beatings or stop while he was ahead. Suddenly, the missile exploded into a cloud of smoke. A sharp black light broke through the air like a vicious snake and arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. Chi! Dixon heard the sound of the bulletproof glass shattering. Then he felt a warm sensation in his chest and saw blood spurting out from his chest. "My God, I've been tricked." A trace of astonishment appeared on Dixon's face. He fell to the ground and died in the blink of an eye. Xianxia had indeed flown 20 nautical miles away, but this was only to make the enemy lower their guard. Besides, those cannonballs and missiles were equipped with highly concentrated explosives. Even if he had a phenomenal success gunmetal divine body, there was no need for him to fight them head-on. However, Little Black Flying Sword and Black Iron Flying Shuttle continued to charge forward after destroying many missiles and cannonballs under his control. Little Black Flying Sword and Black Iron Flying Shuttle were not firearms and could not be captured by the thermal imaging radar system. This created the illusion that the enemy had retreated and caught Colonel Dixon and the others off guard. Under the control of Xianxia's divine sense, Little Black Flying Sword and Black Iron Flying Shuttle quickly pierced through the warship and killed everyone in sight. On the black skeleton, blood burst out and waves of blood gushed out. Screams and howls of agony could be heard incessantly. The mercenaries fell to the ground one by one like harvested rice, turning into lifeless corpses. In less than a minute, more than 300 mercenaries were all dead. Not a single one was left alive. Only the Black Iron Flying Shuttle was left floating quietly in the air. Little Black Flying Sword was flying up and down happily, as if it had drunk enough human blood and was especially happy. Colonel Dixon, Sir Wilson. On more than a dozen transport ships, many captains, crew members and workers were panicking and shouting into their walkie-talkies. The black skeleton fell into a strange silence and there was no reply. Under the night sky, only the black skeleton flag dripping with blood could be heard. The black skeleton was like a ghost ship, sailing forward at a fixed speed. Those mercenaries all seemed to be dead. Could there be ghosts? On the leading transport ship, Sirius, someone cried out in unease. They were the closest to the armed ships, and this inexplicable battle in their eyes was even more strange. They did not see the enemy at all. They saw 3 helicopters fall, followed by countless cannonballs and missiles exploding in the air. In the end, the mercenaries on the deck of the black skeleton fell silently one by one. "Tell your partners to return to Sidoni." Suddenly, a figure appeared out of thin air in the cockpit like a ghost. This person had black hair and black eyes. His face was so handsome that it was almost demonic. He was like a god looking down on everyone. Could it be that he was the one who killed those mercenaries? The captain of the Sirius was uneasy. He went forward in fear, but he forced himself to calm down and put on a tough stance. "I'm the captain of this transport ship. We're a legal transport ship that belongs to France's New World Renewable Energy Company. According to international law and international sea law, we have the right to sail on the international high seas without being ordered or threatened by anyone." "That's right. What right do you have to make us return? We didn't enter your territorial waters. We're just moving on the high seas." The other people also looked at Xianxia proudly, and kept shouting while pretending to be tough but actually cowardly. Sometimes, a mob would fall into collective unconsciousness. With someone taking the lead to be tough, it emboldened the others and made them forget the fact that they were ants. I'm talking to you about the law and you're being a hooligan. I'm being a hooligan and you're talking about the law. Jiang Tian smiled disdainfully. With a whoosh, a wind blade split the captain in half. Fush. Waves of blood rolled and sprayed on the faces of the surrounding people. Steaming internal organs fell to the ground. Everyone was stunned and kept quiet out of fear. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Now can you return? Jiang Tian asked indifferently. Return will return immediately. Everyone was trembling in fear as they said in unison. I'm Jason, the captain of the New World Fleet. Please stop the killing. I order all ships to return to Sidoni. A white-haired old man stepped forward, trembling. His face was full of fear as he said with a sobbing tone. A moment later, under Jason's orders, more than a dozen transport ships returned to the northern bay of Sidoni. At this moment, Qin Yang, King Arthur, Chancellor Ander and Archbishop Dashiel had already received the news and were on a destroyer named Glory Day to welcome them. This destroyer originally belonged to the Great Circle. Now it was also part of the Sky Army fleet. Master, you captured a cruiser? Qin Yang couldn't believe it when he saw that the black skeleton had been annihilated. It's worth at least 1 billion USD, 10 billion Wuxia yuan. Everyone exclaimed. That's nothing. I can even capture an aircraft carrier. Jiang Tian smiled indifferently as he jumped onto the deck of Glory Day, and said indifferently, "This is your master's wife." Jiang Tian then introduced Zhou Xian to everyone. Disciple Qin Yang greets master's wife. Qin Yang's face was full of respect as he kowtowed 3 times and bowed 9 times. No need to stand on ceremony. Get up. Zhou Xian smiled faintly. Everyone was amazed by her elegant demeanor. Little Arthur, this is your godmother. Why are you hiding behind her? Jiang Tian waved at little Arthur who was hiding behind Qin Yang and said with a smile. They hadn't seen each other for a few months. Little Arthur caught up with Qin Yang. His cheeks were plump and his body was much more balanced. His pair of clear eyes were still so bright and full of spirit. My godmother must be a fairy. Little Arthur walked forward and was dazzled. He felt that Zhou Xian was too beautiful, as if she was the Virgin Mary. Everyone laughed when they heard this. Zhou Xian's maternal instincts exploded. She liked this clever little boy very much. She hugged Arthur and kissed him on the cheek. She said with a smile, "Don't call me godmother in the future. Call me mom." "Okay, mom." After all, Arthur was much more generous than before. He immediately shouted in a crisp voice which made Zhou Xian very happy. No one noticed that after Zhou Xian put little Arthur down. Little Arthur turned around and pretended to look at the ship, letting his tears flow freely. I have a father and a mother. Little Arthur felt very warm in his heart. After greeting each other, they immediately held a short meeting in a cabin of the Glory Day. What should we do with these people? Qin Yang pointed at the crew and workers on the transport ship and asked. They are hostages and bargaining chips for us to negotiate with France. Let them work and dig out all the garbage. Jiang Tian smiled faintly. This is a French ship. Qin Yang was full of admiration. Master was too domineering. How is Qin Yang doing in Sidoni these days? Jiang Tian calmly sipped his fragrant tea as he looked at Chancellor Andrew and the others. Mr. Qin is very impressive. He donated 1 billion USD to the drinking water project and brought clean water to all of Sidoni. Speaker Ander smiled. Moreover, he personally supervised each project and only slept for 3 to 4 hours a day. Now the people of Sidoni like him and the Senate is very supportive of him. I think it is time for me to step down as the interim president. Jiang Tian thought that Ander was also a clever person. He probably also knew the reason why he arranged Qin Yang to come here. Jiang Tian smiled. Ander, you are also my best friend. I believe in you. There is no problem for you to be the president. According to the Constitution, the Speaker of the Senate can never also be the President. Ander said seriously, me being the interim president is only a temporary measure. Moreover, I and dozens of other senators all agreed that Mr. Qin Yang is very suitable to be the president. Because maybe we will face a war. And only Mr. Qin Yang has the talent to command the military. Therefore, our Senate has held an election and Mr. Qin Yang was unanimously elected as the president of Sidoni. Chapter 632. Qin Yang, congratulations. Jiang Tian was not surprised. Xianxia had already become a citizen of Sidoni and had done a lot for the people of Sidoni. It was normal for the people of Sidoni to support him. In fact, the elites of Sidoni like Andy also understood. The complicated situation of Sidoni was not something they could handle. "Master, you gave me all of this, I will work hard." Xianxia seemed a little embarrassed and then promised excitedly. "I didn't give it to you, you earned it with your own ability." Jiang Tianyu said solemnly, "More importantly, don't let down the trust and great trust of the people of Sidoni." In the future he planned to focus on cultivation. He would either cultivate in seclusion for a long time or search for treasures. In short, he would break through to the level of foundation establishment as soon as possible. In that way, even if nuclear weapons were to appear, they would not be able to hurt him. Then he would travel the world, scour the ground, search for resources, further improve his cultivation, and explore the secrets of the ruins of immortality. Finally, using the ruins of immortality as a springboard, he would take his lover, family, and friends to the ancient path of the stars and return to the world of cultivation. But the prerequisite for all of this was cultivation. Whether it was the ruins of immortality or the world of cultivation, they were thousands of times more dangerous than Earth. Only with a strong cultivation could one be invincible. And once he left Sidoni or cultivated in seclusion, he would have to entrust the affairs of the mortal world to Xianxia. Xianxia had to build Sidoni into a powerful country so that the superpowers of the world would not dare to interfere with his cultivation. "Master, I understand." Xianxia suddenly felt a great responsibility. His face became serious and he clenched his fists, secretly determined not to let his master down. "Andy, you foresee war?" At this time Jiang Tian smiled meaningfully and said, "Do you think that I brought war to Sidoni?" "No. War has always existed." Andy straightened his body and said seriously, "It's just that Master Kong is helping us. You are our savior." Sidoni was rich in magnetite and rare earth minerals, and had long been a meal on the plate of the superpowers. For this reason, Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom supported warlords for more than 10 years. But even if the war ended and a certain regime stabilized, it would still be a puppet regime of a great power. The imperialists would drain Sidoni's resources or treat Sidoni as a garbage dump. Who would be like Jiang Tian, who would preserve their sovereignty and help them build a rich and beautiful new country. Could be said that Jiang Tian was helping them. He was their benefactor, their savior. In other words, Jiang Tian and Sidoni had a common enemy and were fighting side by side. Jiang Tian nodded slightly, glanced at everyone and asked coldly, "By the way, who's the boss behind the New World Company?" "France's #1 conglomerate, the Rothschild family." Andy's expression was complicated as he said with a hint of fear, "The Rothschild family is nothing." Jiang Tian laughed disdainfully. "You're not worthy of being my opponent. Isn't it rumored that the Rothschild family is very powerful?" Professor Andy asked in confusion. "In 2007, when I was studying abroad in Wuxia, I read a scholar's book, Currency Wars. He said that the Rothschild family was very powerful and had tens of trillions of dollars in assets. That was just a second-rate scholar. He was from a gold trading company. Of course, he would advocate the gold standard." Jiang Tian sneered disdainfully. "The Rothschild family suffered heavy losses in World War I and World War II. Their current assets are only 9 billion euros. "Then Master, you're thinking of..." Xianxia was shocked. Master was too domineering. In his eyes, the Rothschild family was just an ant. "Only France is worthy of being my opponent. Our army has been training for months. It's time to pull them out for a drill." Andy is right. Wars have always existed. I'm afraid the first war is coming. Jiang Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked towards the north. That was where the superpower France was located. After the meeting with Jiang Tian, the president of Sidoni, Mr. Xianxia, spoke to the global media. With the support of the Black Skull mercenaries, New World Energy Company has been dumping pollutants, including medical waste, nuclear waste and chemical waste, in the waters of Sidoni's North Port for 10 consecutive years. This has seriously polluted Sidoni's territorial waters, causing permanent pollution that is difficult to treat. Fish and shrimp have died, the marine aquaculture industry has collapsed, and 30,000 people have fallen ill. This has caused great losses and pain to the people of Sidoni. After statistics, the losses have reached at least $50 billion. For this reason, The Sidonie government has notified the French government 3 times in the past 3 months, and raised serious protests to the United Nations Environment Programme 4 times. But the French dignitaries regard the blood and tears of the people of Sidonie as dung. They have never stopped their despicable actions that violate the territorial integrity of our country's territorial waters. We have used various legal diplomatic means, but we still can't get their attention. This afternoon at 5 o'clock, the Black Skull mercenaries killed 12 innocent Sidonie civilians who defended their sovereignty. We can only fight back to defend the integrity of our country's territory and sovereignty. And we have detained 306 New World employees to arouse the attention of the French government. Now we ask for compensation from New World, or the French government to fulfill their national compensation obligations and compensate the Sidonie government with $50 billion. These funds will be used to treat the polluted environment and treat the people of Sidonie who are seriously ill because of the environmental pollution. Otherwise, we will detain the hostages indefinitely. When this news came out, France was shocked. The whole world was shocked. Sidonie was known as the world's poorest and most backward small country, with a population of only a few 100,000 people. There was no modern industry, no modern army. But they dared to detain more than 300 French citizens. They were simply tired of living. France, Paris. Hemingway once said, "If you are lucky enough to be in Paris when you are young, then no matter where you go in the future, it will follow you for the rest of your life." Paris is a moving banquet. Here, after the change of dynasties, it had created an imposing aura of wealth. Along the banks of the Seine River, holy churches and magnificent palaces were built one after another. The Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay, Notre Dame de Paris, the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe. Even though Paris was a first-tier metropolis in the world, and every inch of land was worth an inch of gold, the Parisians spared no effort to improve the environment. This place was filled with fragrant lawns, colorful gardens, and verdant woods. Of course, this could not be separated from the efforts of New World. It was they who dumped the difficult-to-deal-with garbage in Sidonie's North Bay, leaving behind such beautiful scenery and clean air. At this time, beside the Seine River, in a luxurious and elegant building built in the 19th century, New World Renewable Energy Company was holding an emergency board meeting. "Gentlemen, it has already happened. How do you think we should resolve it?" The chairman of New World's board of directors, Raymond, was very young. He was in his early 30s, handsome, elegant, and graceful. This kind of temperament could not be faked. It had to be nurtured by many years of being in a rich family. $50 billion in compensation, we absolutely cannot accept it. That's equivalent to losing 10 new worlds. An old man in luxurious clothes sneered and said, "I think the Sidonie government has gone mad from poverty. This is blackmail. It's not like we're the only company dumping garbage in Sidonie. All the large companies in the world are doing the same." Another shareholder lit a premium Cuban cigar, took a light puff and said with disdain, "Even if we have to compensate, it should be everyone, not just New World. I think this matter should be handed over to the Élysée Palace." Another lady with a graceful temperament shrugged her shoulders and said with a look of disdain, "If His Excellency the President can't even deal with a small, poor country like Sidonie, he can step down. If the President doesn't take tough measures against Sidonie, we'll lead the union to protest." 300 workers being detained. This is the first time in French diplomatic history after World War II. That's right. Sidonie is just a small, poor country. It's nothing to worry about. Yes. Sidonie even broke out the legend of the gods, saying that there are a few gods who can fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. How laughable. I think they're just bluffing. I'm afraid the French government will just put a little pressure on them and they'll obediently let them go. That's right. I think it's not just us. All the big countries in the world that treat Sidonie as a garbage dump will put pressure on Sidonie. The atmosphere of the meeting was very relaxed. No one took Sidonie's statement seriously at all. In their eyes, Sidonie was like a country bumpkin trying to extort money from the rich. As long as everyone was firm, the other party would give in at any time. Once money makes a sound, the bad words will stop abruptly. Raymond painted his nails with colorless finger paint and looked at them. Sure enough, they were much brighter. He smiled disdainfully. "Then let's do it this way. The public relations department will contact the Élysée Palace and the major media and ask for their help. After saying that, he stood up and left the office. He also had an appointment with a famous model that he had been admiring for a long time in his private villa. If the previous pursuit and goodwill were watering, then today was the day to harvest the fruit. Raymond's full name was Raymond Rothschild. This was a glorious surname. In his eyes, a small African country like Sidonie was simply vulnerable. The act of holding hostages was courting death. Chapter 633. In the 19th century, the Rothschild family was almost synonymous with money and wealth. In 1814 they supported Napoleon against the European Union. In 1854, they also provided a £16 million loan for the British war against Russia in Crimea. In 1871, they took out another £100 million to pay Prussia for the Franco-Prussian War reparations. They also controlled all the railways in Europe. All the loans from France to Russia were provided by the family. During the UA Civil War, they became the main source of finance for the federal government. Although they made a strategic mistake in 1865, believing that the UA economy would not develop rapidly and missed the UA market, which led to the rise of the giant Morgan family. Although they suffered heavy losses in World War I and World War II, many of their assets were destroyed and confiscated, and they gradually became a second-rate consortium in the world, especially suppressed by many UA consortiums. Although the actual assets of the Rothschild family were less than €9 billion, which was far less than Zhang Tian's. But in Europe, especially in France, the Rothschild family was still one of the largest consortiums. In the base camp of France, the Rothschild family had rich connections with various forces. They could influence presidential elections and manipulate judicial institutions at will. Even the president and the mayor of Paris had to respect his father, Nathan, and not offend him. A group of Sidonie Negroes want to suck the marrow out of the Rothschild family. They are crazy. Raymond, who left the office building, came to the parking lot, sat in his Bugatti Veyron and shook his head in disdain. This is a serious violation of human rights, and a serious violation of international law. 3 hours after Yang Chen's press conference, the spokesperson of the French Ministry of Defense gathered the media to respond with a very tough attitude. We express strong condemnation and serious concern, urging the Sidonie government to immediately release the prisoners and reserve the right to take military action. During the Q&A session, he also said contemptuously, "Sidonie's current army is just a group of pirates. You also know that Sidonie has always been a notorious pirate." In less than an hour, Yang Chen spoke to all the media again with only one simple sentence. "We urge the French government to fulfill the national compensation within 2 weeks. Otherwise, the French government will bear the consequences. Don't say I didn't warn you. Sidonie is ready for battle. Don't say I didn't warn you." This was the harshest diplomatic language. The world was in an uproar. Sidonie's government was crazy. France was one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations. France had a 300,000-strong army and possessed advanced weaponry such as nuclear weapons, aircraft carriers and intercontinental missiles. Sidonie's military strength is only in the tens of thousands. After years of war, they were extremely poor. They don't even have fighter jets, and they are basically junk left over from World War II. How dare they provoke France? This was like an ant trying to shake a tree, a joke. In the Élysée Palace, the President of France, Xianxia, held an emergency state meeting to discuss this matter and countermeasures. A small African country dares to detain the crew of our French Empire? This is the biggest joke in the world. President Xianxia slammed the table and shouted angrily. In fact, he was facing a lot of pressure. On one hand, it came from the Rothschild family. On one hand, it came from the public. At present, there are many trade union demonstrations in the streets, protesting against the government's failure to protect the workers, making Paris a mess. The French people have always had a glorious tradition of liking revolution. Throughout history, political forces often impeached the president and asked him to step down. I think we have to take practical action. Otherwise, it will affect your public support. The Deputy Minister of Defense said in a deep voice. Moreover, we don't need to make a big fuss. We only need to send a naval formation and it will be enough to deter them. I think the Atlantic Fleet is more than enough, right? A naval chief of staff curled his lips in disdain. The French Navy has 40,000 people and the Atlantic Fleet, Mediterranean Fleet, Anti-Submarine Warfare Force, Indian Ocean Naval Force, Strategic Submarine Force, Naval Aviation Force, Mine Warfare Force, Marine Corps, and so on. No, let's use the Marine Corps. Another senior staff officer's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, "We have received intelligence that Sidonie has a large amount of rich magnetite. Well, after we win, we will ask them to compensate for our losses and get the rich magnetite." President Xianxia nodded in agreement. Once it is achieved, it will be the most dazzling political achievement of this government. Don't the Americans always like to do this? I think we should start a media war to win the support and sympathy of the international community. At this time, the Minister of Foreign Affairs reminded him. Sidonie has always been rampant with pirates. It's not the first time pirates have taken hostages. A good suggestion. President Xianxia said proudly. War always needs a just reason. We don't want to invade other countries, we just want to save our citizens. This is a just war, isn't it? What the French government did not expect was that Sidonie came prepared. The media war started before France. The Sidonie government released a 2-hour documentary to the world, The Crying Sidonie North Bay. The director of the documentary was Louis Sihoyas, who became famous because of the release of Dolphin Bay in 2009 that exposed the Japanese whaling incident. In this documentary, under the leadership of a marine environmentalist, a group of adventurous environmentalists sailed into Sidonie North Bay in a speedboat. Here, hundreds of garbage ships from developed countries dumped garbage here every year. The originally blue sea water turned into a colorful soup. Fish and shrimp died, seabirds mourned, fishermen cried in despair, and children with strange diseases were dying in mud houses. Mercenary companies shot Sidonie civilians without any psychological burden. Human lives were like grass. The environmentalists used cameras to faithfully record the frightening and shocking scenes. This pollution and these crimes were ignored by the French government and hidden by relevant organizations because of various interests. Most people did not expect that the New World Company, which claimed to use modern technology to deal with garbage and waste, only treated the Third World as a garbage dump and dumped pollutants there without any treatment. In order to protect the environment of the territorial waters and survive, the people of Sidonie had no choice but to kidnap the staff of the garbage ships. However, they were regarded as notorious pirates by the world. The documentary set off from Sidonie North Bay and traveled to France, the United States, and more than a dozen other countries and regions. It interviewed industry insiders and traced the source. It tore apart France and many developed international interest groups and exposed them to the world. After the documentary was released, major media outlets around the world competed to forward and pay attention to it. Especially Facebook, Twitter, and other media outlets, which made the video the headlines for 3 days in a row. The number of comments exceeded 100 million in 3 days. When they saw children covered in poison sores due to marine pollution wailing and trembling on old mud-heatable beds. When they saw the transport ships dumping dirty garbage into the blue and clear seawater, they were shocked. When they saw dead seabirds wrapped in oil waste looking up at the sky like sculptures, everyone was shocked, in tears, and angry. Hypocritical country, France. This is too ugly. We want to boycott all their products and enterprises. France and that New World Company are guilty of many unforgivable crimes. Are only the French people human, and the people of Sidonie are not human? These developed countries always talk about human rights. I think France is the most disgusting country. What a disgusting country. France is rich in luxury goods and always considers itself a romantic country. Is their romance based on pollution of other countries? Boycott the New World Company. Boycott all the enterprises and products of the Rothschild family. On the internet, everyone was angry. Among them, there was no lack of French citizens. At this time, the French government was stunned. President Xianxia was also stunned. Caught off guard. Sidonie, a small country, poor and backward, full of plagues and pirates, how could it make so many high-quality documentaries and have so many Western media outlets supporting it? Who knew that Jiang Tian's observer, Merrill, was an expert in the battle of public opinion? The last time Jiang Tian left Sidonie and returned to his country, he instructed them to deal with the pollution of the Northern Gulf. Chancellor Andrew and Merrill were fully prepared, but this time France was caught off guard. In fact, all the major countries in the world had spies and intelligence personnel. They could more or less figure out each other's background. But France had never paid attention to Sidonie. Because Sidonie was too weak, too poor, and too insignificant. In addition, America, Britain, and Russia had always been supporting the warlords, so France could not get involved. Sidonie's Northern Gulf incident quickly attracted the attention of the intelligence agencies of the entire Dark World and the Western world. What is France doing? In the Palace of the Gods, Queen of Heaven Hera exclaimed, "For decades, supers and practitioners have been hiding underground and have never been exposed to the world. Once exposed, the logic of the entire social order will be overturned. Is the Rothschild family crazy? How dare they provoke Kong Techu? Kong Techu is an existence that can kill saints consecutively. He can kill them with one finger. The current Kong Techu is not alone. All the strong people in the world have submitted to him. Don't the Rothschild family and France know why Sidonie is so confident? That's because he has a god like Kong Techu. Like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, the Dark World was in an uproar. All the strong people were paying attention. Countless strong people looked at the Atlantic Ocean, looked at Sidonie, looked at France, and were shocked. If the Dark World was only shocked, then the military intelligence agencies of the Western countries were furious. Chapter 634. Damn France, damn New World, why did they provoke Sidonie? Don't they know that it's Kong Techu's territory? The British MI6 director was furious as he slammed the table and roared. Once the war starts, Kong Techu is likely to defeat the entire French army like how he defeated the 28th Japanese Mixed Brigade. The world will be in chaos. Immediately inform the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Contact France. And convene an emergency meeting of the European Union coalition. Mr. Raymond, I advise you to maintain respect for Sidonie and not offend this country. Otherwise you will regret it. Almost at the same time, Paris Hilton made an overseas call to Raymond and kindly reminded him. Raymond was sitting on a large bed covered in velvet with his legs wide open. He was enjoying the pleasure of talking with the model Vivienne, who had shone brightly during last autumn's Paris Fashion Week. He smiled casually and casually said, "Paris, are you kidding? Sidonie is a godforsaken place. Do you need me to maintain respect?" His large hand rhythmically pressed on Vivienne's head as he said with an expression of enjoyment, "My family will support and facilitate this war to occupy Sidonie. Do you want to bet with me? I heard that there is a shocking amount of rich magnetite there. Don't you know that this is Kong Techu's territory?" Paris sneered and interrupted his wishful thinking. Kong Techu? I think he's Chinese. Raymond felt that this name was very familiar, as if he had heard it before. "Let me remind you," Paris said coldly, "he previously defeated the Guo family of Nanyang, and then your family also participated in the acquisition of the Guo family of Nanyang. His assets are $300 billion, or even more, equivalent to 10 Rothschilds." "Oh, I remember now, it's him." Raymond suddenly realized, but he immediately said with arrogance and disdain, "But this doesn't scare me. France isn't Singapore. We are a military powerhouse, we won't lose. Maybe you should call him now and persuade him to give up on the compensation. A country bumpkin from Wuxia dares to provoke us and try to shake the Rothschild family. You must be crazy. Raymond, if you continue to be so stubborn, I'm afraid our friendship will end here." Paris's voice was unprecedentedly cold. "Paris, you idiot woman, how dare you threaten me?" Raymond frowned. His face suddenly turned cold as he said in a serious tone, "Kong Techu is no match for our family and Sidonie is no match for France. You'd better be smart and figure out which side you should stand on. Raymond, you will regret your decision today." Paris hung up the phone. Then he glanced at the many California Consortium members in the Oval Conference Room, shrugged and said helplessly, "Gentlemen, I've tried my best, but I can't make this idiot smarter." Mr. Marshall tapped his fingers on the armrest of the chair and said helplessly, "No one wants to see war. If Mr. Jiang strikes again, the United States of America will be alerted and the Eagle faction will rise again. This will also increase the difficulty of our work in the United States. But this is all we can do. Then let's..." He shook his head regretfully, then suddenly stood up, raised his glass and smiled brilliantly, "Pray for France to be finished soon." Next to him, Qin Jinming, the chairman of the One Eye Fund on Wall Street, politely raised his glass and smiled. Mr. Jiang called me earlier and asked me to tell everyone that he never mistreats his allies. This time France is bound to lose. He wants everyone to prepare funds and make a fortune together. He was dressed in a black custom-made suit, which made him look elegant and capable. This time Mr. Jiang personally invested $30 billion. In addition, the Great Circle, Tanjuan's family, Li Xianlong's family, Sakura Society, Yamaguchi-gumi, and many other allies have joined the camp. The One-Eye Fund has already made the specific sniping plan. The overall idea is to short France's CAC index and acquire French core companies at the right time. I believe that after this battle, we will be able to control France's economic lifeline. His assistant had already distributed the materials and Marshall and others had already read them. Mr. Qin, you're known as the financial magician on Wall Street. Especially when you shorted real estate bonds during the financial tsunami, I was deeply amazed. At this time Marshall smiled with appreciation. Now your fund company's performance has far surpassed Soros and Rogers. I'm afraid that the next step will be to the same level as the Goldman Sachs Group and Morgan Chase. He said with deep emotion, it's just that I didn't expect you to be Mr. Zhang's friend. The world is really small. Out of trust in Mr. Zhang's character, out of recognition of your performance and ability, I'm willing to invest $50 billion. The Hilton family will invest $10 billion. Paris Hilton smiled. $1 billion. $7 billion. Many other California consortium members present followed, and the amount of trading funds rose steadily. Pie champagne is ready. I hope that in the near future we will be able to celebrate together. When they parted, Mr. Marshall personally led everyone to send Qin Jinming to the door of Lu Yu wine cellar. For sure. Qin Jinming smiled reservedly, shook hands with everyone one by one, and turned to leave with his assistant. After getting on the bulletproof black Mercedes-Benz, Qin Jinming panted, his head was still dizzy, and he felt like he was in a dream. Motherfucker. Jiang Tian, don't play too big. One person to hunt down a country and put Sidoni in the bag. Control the US Senate, kill the CIA director. One person to kill a country. Hunt down Sidoni, after all that was a small country in Africa. Control the US Senate, after all it was only one of the 3 branches. But now you want to rob France. You don't hesitate to start a war and turn the whole of France into your ATM. This is France. The earth is too small to accommodate you. If the truth of this war is revealed, I'm afraid it will be far more than the Asian financial crisis caused by Soros. After watching Qin Jinming's car drive away, Marshall turned to look at the crowd and smiled. Everyone, since the other party wants to go to war, then let's support Mr. Jiang and win this battle. Mr. Marshall, I believe that this war will go down in history. Everyone was excited. Mike was so excited that his whole body was trembling and he couldn't help but shout. He was the founder of Facebook and he was expected to be one of the top 5 richest people in the world in the future. But compared to Jiang Tian, who single-handedly hunted down an entire country, he felt that playing the internet was like playing house. That night, the boss of Facebook, Mike, posted on the internet. The boss behind the New World Renewable Energy Company is Raymond from the Rothschild family. If you want to boycott the Rothschild family's products first. As far as I know, Wealth Bank, Rothschild Investment Bank, Jones Jewelry, and Aniline Cosmetics are all their sub-brands. I think anyone with a conscience will reject these products stained with the blood and tears of the African people. Paris immediately forwarded the message. Paris was an international socialite with tens of millions of followers on Twitter, and she was very influential. Almost all her friends were big names in the film and fashion industry. Celebrities, directors, models, and so on, each of them had tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of fans. When she raised her arm and called for action, many people responded. This topic instantly became a hot topic and its popularity soared. I apologize to the public. I will stop working with Jones Jewelry, and I will no longer be their spokesperson. A Hollywood superstar posted on Twitter, "Tonight, I cry for Sidoni." In Japan, tens of thousands of people took to the streets in the name of environmentalism under the control of Sakura Society and fucking gang. They smashed Jones Jewelry and Aniline's stores into pieces. Wealth Bank was forced to close down because of the bank's bad behavior. In South Korea, Lee Jinju, the lord of Tanjung Palace, had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. The South Korean Justice and Taxation Department came to the Rothschild family and arrested several senior executives in South Korea. They were charged with tax evasion and illegal business operations. The Rothschild family's branches in South Korea were shut down. In Singapore, President Lee Hsien Loong personally signed a presidential decree to terminate the $3 billion sewage treatment system contract that New World had just signed with the Singapore government. In Wuxia, Rothschild Investment Bank underwrote 3 U.S. IPOs to help a Wuxia automobile company acquire Volvo. However, several Wuxia companies terminated the deal because it would negatively affect the company, and the company suffered a loss of $1 billion. In the end, the spiritual leader of the California consortium, Mr. Marshall, spoke to the Rothschild patriarch, Mr. Nathan, in a personal interview with Fox. Mr. Nathan Rothschild, are you really that poor? Can't you afford to compensate the poor people of Sidoni? I'll compensate them for you. I'll pay $1 billion. His words were sharp as he commented, Mr. Nathan, what is a real tycoon? Wealth is not only about money but also how noble your spirit is. Not only are you poor but your personality is poorer than your wealth. In Silicon Valley, a new online charity fundraising company launched an online fundraising project to compensate the Sidoni fishermen for the Rothschild family who are as poor in both money and spirit. Mr. Marshall's $1 billion donation was credited to the project account on the same day. Then Iris, Jenny, Rachel, Michael, Gates, Oracle, and other tech companies in California immediately followed up and launched the Ice Bucket Challenge. The amount of donations continued to rise. $5 billion, $6 billion, $10 billion. Not only the upper class was paying attention to this event, but in fact the entire world was paying attention to this event. All the netizens were donating and participating in the Ice Bucket Challenge, turning this event into an international internet party. I'm not drinking Hennessy anymore, my head is so heavy. This morning, Raymond, who had been partying for several days, got up from the bed of the famous model Vivian. He grabbed the latest Apple phone and scrolled through his Twitter account. His whole body was frozen like a statue and his eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets. Chapter 635. Paris, you bitch. He was so angry that he smashed the latest fruit phone and the screen parts flew everywhere. In just one night, several luxury brands controlled by the Rothschild family had now become notorious brands. In the eyes of ordinary people, they had become rats that everyone wanted to kill. The entire family group had almost stopped operating. In high society, the Rothschild family had become a complete laughingstock. How could a small conflict with a small African country turn out like this? When did people have such a strong sense of justice? The world shouldn't be like this. Raymond, I'm ashamed of you. You actually did such a despicable and shameless thing. Vivian, who had just become his girlfriend, stared at him with tears in her eyes. Her fists were clenched and her face was full of hatred and disdain, as if she had seen her father's murderer. Vivian, listen to me, things are not like what the media said. Raymond got up naked and stepped forward, trying to hug and comfort his girlfriend. Go away. You are the same as your father, a wolf that eats people without spitting out the bones. Vivian raised her leg and kneed Raymond in the crotch. Raymond screamed, bent down to hold the egg and fell to the ground. The veins on his forehead were throbbing in pain. Go away, or I'll call the police. Vivian threw his clothes on him and shouted, You make me feel sick, you are like an ugly maggot. Raymond struggled to get up and put on his clothes, but he had no time and patience to persuade his new girlfriend. Because his brother James had called, his father Nathan had learned of the matter and asked him to go home to discuss it. James was one step ahead of him. He pushed off today's board meeting and had already driven to the Champs-Élysées on the side of the Place de la Concorde. A European-style villa with the number 11 to 18 was where the Rolls lived. Today was Mr. Nathan's golf day. He went out during the day and returned home in the afternoon. When he got home he saw that both brothers were there. Nathan drank a glass of La Romanée-Conti wine, walked upstairs with his cane and said faintly, Let's talk in the study. In the study, after listening to James's report, Mr. Nathan's face was livid. With his hands in his trouser pockets he kept scolding Raymond for more than 10 minutes. Finally, Nathan gradually calmed down after James comforted him. James said, Dad, I think Raymond has realized his mistake. In fact, the New World Company was not the only company to dump garbage into Sidoni's North Bay. Many international giants were doing the same. Lei Meng has just taken over the company, so it's understandable that he's anxious to achieve results. I think the biggest problem is that the other party came prepared. The documentary has already been shot. More importantly, there is the involvement of a California consortium. Is this targeting you and the entire Rothschild family? Nathan frowned, a thoughtful expression on his face. James was already speaking earnestly and anxiously. Dad, over the years, under the attacks of the major financial groups in the United States, we have completely withdrawn from the United States since Grandpa's generation. We only operate in Europe and Wuxia and other emerging markets. If we compensate, it won't be enough even if we sell the entire family. Sidoni and the mastermind behind the scenes should understand this. They clearly want to use the international dispute to strike from the air and kill the Rothschild family in one blow. Nathan took a deep breath. His slightly widened eyes were filled with murderous intent. What I can teach you in this life is the precious experience left by me and my father. I once said before that once money is mentioned, the bad words will stop immediately. Use money to control the media and maintain a good reputation for the family. I once asked you to pay attention to the emerging internet companies in Silicon Valley, but you were scared by the internet bubble in the 1990s. Now, the global media is our enemy. This is the consequence of your lack of development. At first glance, this matter seems to be a step back. But only we know that there is no way to retreat from this battle. $50 billion. Sidoni and the supporters behind the scenes are really greedy. In fact, after World War II, the family was even more difficult than it is now. The family's assets in Italy, England, and Germany were destroyed in the war. During the Cold War, the assets in Eastern Europe were confiscated by the Soviet communists. It was I who snatched food from the mouths of the Goldman Sachs Group, the Morgan family, and the Rockefeller family. I controlled the natural gas, nuclear energy, solar energy, and other industries in France. They said that I was greedy and snatching food from the tiger's mouth. But I relied on this to revive the Rothschild family. Nathan looked at his two beloved sons in front of him. His voice was cold and solemn. Including now, some financial media people and some mediocre economists are criticizing my current strategy. They say that I invested a large amount of money in nuclear power and solar energy technology, causing the Rothschild family to lose money. But I dare say that with the depletion of our energy, nuclear power plants and solar energy will definitely make money. Some people advise me that sometimes I still have to compromise and not be too extreme. Otherwise, it will be easy to be embarrassed in the future. But I, Nathan, only know one thing in my life. If I want to take a step forward, I will destroy whoever dares to stand in my way. As far as I know, Sidoni is controlled by a group of Chinese organizations called the Big Circle. Before this, they were all gangsters who sold drugs, sold human beings, and killed without batting an eye. He shook his head in disdain and said, "Humph." A group of underlings who can't even be seen in public dares to call themselves kings and presidents. They dare to go on a killing spree and let the black skeleton mercenaries stain Sidoni's North Bay with blood. Raymond added with a solemn expression, "The other person is Kong Teichu. I heard that he's a cultivator who can fly and burrow into the ground." "I've heard of him." "What a joke. Since when did Wuxia's cultivators have the final say in this world?" Mr. Nathan still appeared very calm. He smiled coldly and said, "This group of underlings dare to hold hostages and maliciously extort people. Since they want to try, let them try." He smiled sinisterly and said domineeringly, "Trying to scare me, Nathan? Very well, then I'll get the French Navy and Air Force to move out. Let's see how powerful they are." "But what about the California consortium behind them?" James frowned and said, "Will they support Sidoni and the Big Circle? After all, America has supported Thorpe before. California consortium? They can't represent America." Nathan sneered disdainfully. "The ones who support Thorpe are mining giants and arms dealers, but that old fart Marshall, he's playing with the internet and new energy. Relying on the internet to fight wars? He stood up. With just a simple straightening movement, he exuded a domineering aura. "Make the call. I want to meet the leader of the Socialist Party and President Xianxia in person. If they want to continue to control France, they must wage war against Sidoni. I want to destroy Sidoni." At the joint meeting of the European Union and many major countries, Britain's MI6 reported the situation of the battle in Sidoni. So the one controlling Sidonie now is Kong Techu. After learning the relevant information, President Xianxia was also briefly shocked. However, after a brief analysis, President Xianxia glanced at the many senior officials present and made a strong statement. Everyone, Kong Techu is very strong, but so what if he has reached the level of a saint? You must know that the European Union is not a weak, poor and backward country, nor is it Japan, which was defeated in World War II. It is the world's second largest economy and has a powerful military force second only to America. How can we bow down to him? The Dutch Minister of Defense said solemnly, Your Excellency, Britain's MI6 and the European Union's supernatural organization, the Pantheon, have done a scientific evaluation of Kong Techu's military force. The results of the evaluation are shocking. Weapons of mass destruction such as intercontinental missiles can't kill him. Perhaps only nuclear weapons can. But you know the price of using nuclear weapons. The Spanish president frowned slightly and said, President Xianxia, Kong Techu is only solving the Gulf of Tonkin incident this time. You just need to urge the New World and the Rothschild family to pay compensation. I don't think we need to start a dispute. A few senior European Union officials shook their heads and looked on coldly. President Xianxia received a lot of financial support from the Rothschild family in the election and was originally in the same camp. Moreover, the Rothschild family controlled several large labor unions in France. How could Xianxia dare to go against the will of the Rothschild family? We're starting a dispute in France? Are you kidding me? It was Sidonie who took the hostages first. Sure enough, President Xianxia said angrily. Once we bow down this time, it will definitely make this person even more arrogant and unscrupulous. He's not alone now. He's in charge of a country and may stir up even more disputes. President Xianxia, you don't know Kong Techu's strength. The British Minister of Defense said solemnly. Just a week ago he controlled the U.S. House of Representatives and sent CIA Director Sheldon to prison. We don't know how much power Kong Techu has at his disposal and how many terrifying trump cards he has. But he's definitely someone who can reach the heavens. After whispering to the director of the French territorial prison for a while, President Xianxia shook his head and said disdainfully. As far as I know, Kong Techu has never been active in France or any other European Union country. Gentlemen, you're being too careful. He's just a human, not a god. He doesn't have the final say in Europe. Then let's vote now. The British Minister of Defense sighed helplessly, then raised his hand. I suggest that France resolve this dispute peacefully. The EU coalition army will not send troops. France or the New World will compensate Sidonie. Those who support my suggestion, please raise your hand. I second it. The Spanish president raised his hand. I second it. I second it. I second it. The heads of state, ministers of defense and high-ranking generals raised their hands, indicating that they would not send troops. Among the 26 countries in the European Union, only France and Sweden expressed that they should jointly send troops to help France. But the minority obeyed the majority, so they could only reserve their opinions. In the end, they decided that the EU coalition army would not send troops. Seeing this, President Xianxia snorted angrily and said angrily, I really don't know what's the point of France staying with such an unmotivated organization. However, the French Commonwealth will definitely not yield to a lowly Chinese cultivator. We'll fight to the end. France, ranked fourth in the world's military, will never back down. Chapter 636. After that, Xianxia left in a huff. The other French representatives left one after another, and the EU joint conference ended unhappily. Selfish bastard. A Belgian intelligence officer looked at President Xianxia's back and said disdainfully, As far as I know, the Rothschild family promised him 30 million euros in political contributions. He is seeking re-election. Idiot. The British Minister of Defense slammed the table and roared, He will consign France to eternal damnation. He will regret it. Behind him, the director of MI6 turned to look at Queen of Heaven Hera and smiled bitterly. You find a way to contact Kong Techu and express the friendliness of the UK and other countries. It's just that France is causing trouble. At this time, Jiang Tian had already started a nationwide inspection in Sidonie with Qing'er. From the North Bay to the south, the four-lane highway crossed the mountains. It was very smooth and the quality of the construction was also very high. On both sides of the road, there were high-voltage wires and communication base stations. There were residential buildings uprooted. The style was uniform, taking into account both beauty and practicality. Jiang Tian even saw many Chinese and English advertisements on the walls of the buildings. Shopping go on dating. Global products converge. Read Wuxia web novels, learn Chinese, work more energetically. Xiaomi smartphone, affordable and visible. This phone seemed to be invested by Zhang Yilan's Yensoft group, known as Born for Fever. Zhang Yilan was very busy now. She flew around all day meeting the Thunder Army today and meeting Jia Yuding tomorrow. Yensoft group almost swept the whole country. The layout was like clouds and the pieces were like rain. Previously she was very interested in Jia Yuding's platform terminal content application, a complete closed-loop ecological chain, but Jiang Tian did not let her invest a single cent. Although Zhang Yilan did not understand why Jiang Tian did this, she still listened obediently. In the end she invested in Xiaomi and more than a dozen other Internet Plus companies. Currently she had made a lot of money and her assets were rapidly expanding. Jiang Tian was very satisfied with everything he saw. Looking at this, in just a few months, Sidonie had stepped from a semi-primitive society into a modern civilized society and into the era of intelligence. Chairman Andrew, President Qinyang, Tang Xiaozi, and the others who accompanied him reported to Jiang Tian. In terms of housing, we use the public rental housing system. Tang Xiaozi and more than a dozen other families have invested $20 billion to register an Anchu real estate company. For each project, Sidonie will provide the state-owned land and convert it into 20% to 30% shares. Tang Xiaozi and the others will provide the funds, technology and construction team to jointly develop the public rental housing. The residents of Dasoni, on the other hand, participate in the construction of many infrastructure projects, obtain the right to live and pay and then rent these houses. If they work hard, they can get permanent residency within 3 years. What you're doing is protecting the people of the world. Well done. Jiang Tian nodded slightly. Actually, before this, there were also some international NGOs that came to Sidonie to promote education and medical care. Chancellor Ander said solemnly, they compassionately report on the backwardness of Africa. The university students would come to donate some clothes and food, teach them some English, pray to God, and praise the simplicity and kindness of the native. And that's it. But in fact it's all just a show, but many people still fall for it. Now it seems that only the Chinese, whether it's the medical aid to Africa or Master Kang's military and economic aid, are the real builders, and are sincerely thinking for the development of Sidonie. Jiang Tian nodded with satisfaction and smiled. How's the enthusiasm of the Black brothers? At this time Chairman Andrew said. Many people think that the reason why Africa is poor is that the Black people are lazy and stupid. But I don't think so. After interacting with the Chinese for a long time, they will be influenced by what they see and hear. After learning and understanding, they will be just as hardworking. Chairman Andrew is right. Next to him, Tai Ming Huang added. After Qinyang and the others came, our construction staff suddenly exceeded 10,000 people. The construction staff has been greatly enriched and many training schools have been opened. The Black brothers of Sidonie work on the construction site during the day, and learn Chinese at night and receive skills training. Now, many of the Sidonie boys who have undergone systematic training have become the mainstay of the construction. They wear the same uniform, washed and starched. They see wearing the uniform of Wuxia as an honor. Although their skin color is different, you will be surprised to find that their temperament is very similar to those hardworking, simple and tough Wuxia workers. As they spoke, they happened to pass by a bridge project that was under construction. The bridge was designed to be 6 lanes. Now that half of it had been built, it could be crossed. Jiang Tian suggested to get out of the car and walk around to take a look. The convoy stopped and a group of people got out of the car. Chairman Andrew pointed to the surging river and introduced, "This is the Cass River, which means Mother River, in the Sidonie language. It is as important to the people of Sidonie as the Yellow River is to Wuxia." He pointed to the iron chain bridge at the side and said, during the West German government's era, they had built a small 2-lane bridge, but it was blown up during the Warlords' War. After that, only this iron chain bridge from the British colonial era was left. 5 iron chains spanned across the river that was more than a few hundred meters wide. 3 of the iron chains below were fixed to some old wooden planks. Many of the planks were damaged and 2 ropes above were used as handrails. When the mountain wind blew, the iron chain bridge swayed with the wind, and everyone's hearts swayed along with it. On the bridge, there was an inconspicuous stone tablet with a few lines of English engraved on it. Built in 1901 AD. The donor was Sir XX. He was probably also a colonist. Heavens, this iron chain bridge is already more than 100 years old. Chinger exclaimed. Chairman Andrew looked at Jiang Tian with reverence and said, before Mr. Jiang came, the residents of Sidoni's North Bay and mountainous areas could only go to San Juan and the southern plains through this iron chain bridge. The tens of thousands of people in North Bay could be said to have been forgotten by their motherland and the world. Now they have finally merged with their motherland. On the side, little Arthur and a few other Sidoni black people looked at Jiang Tian with reddened eyes. There was no need to say more words of gratitude. If there was anything to say, it would take more than 3 days and 3 nights to say it all. They who were not good with words had already explained everything with their tears. Let's go to the construction site. Jiang Tian nodded and walked toward the construction site of the bridge. The construction site was very busy, and it was in full swing. Hook machines, excavators, and cranes were all in motion. The roar of the machines and the hubbub of voices filled the air. The construction progress was very fast. Knowing that Kong Teichu, President Chen Yang, and Chairman Andrew had arrived, a few project managers quickly came to greet and introduce them. Wuxia's engineers are in charge of the design, technology, and supervision during the construction, but most of the labor is from Sidoni. They came from the nearby 3-pound plantation. The project manager introduced. 3-pound plantation? That's a strange name. Jiang Tian asked with interest. Seeing Jiang Tian's question, the project manager was a little uneasy and tongue-tied. Jiang Tian smiled and said, don't be nervous, just chatting. Seeing that Jiang Tian was very kind, the project manager gradually calmed down and said, Mr. Jiang, I don't know the original name of this tribe. At the beginning of the 19th century, during the colonial period, a British gentleman bought all the land and labor from the colonial government for the price of the 3-pound plantation. The land became a private plantation and the labor force was almost the same as serfs. Although later, after the Independence War, the establishment of the West German government, and the war between the Cuba new government and the warlords, the plantation changed hands several times. Now that the new government is established, every family is given land and freedom is restored, but the name, 3-pound plantation, still remains. At this time, a black teenager suddenly rushed to Jiang Tian and knelt down. He kept kowtowing and said excitedly, Taichu, Taichu. Thank you for saving me. You are Babilu. Jiang Tian recognized that this kid was the teenager Babilu that he saved a few days ago in the North Bay. He could not help but smile. Yes, it's me. Honorable Taichu deity, my name is Zhang San now. I'm working here. Babilu said excitedly. Zhang San. Now the people of Sidoni like to use the name of Wuxia. Chen Yang said helplessly. They also like to paint Chinese characters on their bodies with paint. It's almost become a fashion. The project manager added, yes, they ask the Chinese staff to name them every day. They have Zhang San Li Si and so on. Jiang Tian took a closer look and saw that Babilu's body was indeed painted with Chinese characters such as Tai Chu, loyalty, righteousness, bravery, and spicy chicken pieces in white paint. Haha, this is also a kind of cultural recognition. Jiang Tian laughed with his hands behind his back. Zhao Xueqing joked. Oh right, Zhang San is here. Where is Li Si? I'm here. My name is Li Si. A black teenager who was older than Babilu raised his hand and walked over. There really is Li Si. Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. Zhao Xueqing was overjoyed. The young man knelt down in front of Jiang Tian without saying anything and kowtowed 3 times. He patted his chest excitedly and said, Thank you, Tai Chu. Give us food and jobs. Chapter 637. Unlike Babilu, this young man was wearing the blue uniform of Unju Real Estate Company. He was obviously an official employee. Babilu or Zhangsan introduced, he is my cousin. Like me, he works here. No need to kneel. There's no God. I'm just a little stronger than you. Jiang Tian pulled Li Si up and smiled. Are you satisfied with your work and life here? Li Si was flattered. He was so excited that he trembled and said, very good. There are prefabricated houses, air conditioning, pesticides, no rain, no mosquitoes, 3 full meals, braised pork. I'm very satisfied. I'll work hard. I've already accumulated 400 engineering points and become an assistant engineer. I'll be qualified to live in a public rental house soon. Yes, a happy life is fought for by yourself. Jiang Tian patted him on the shoulder and said earnestly, don't worry. Your parents will be proud of you and live a good life because of you. Hearing this, Li Si's eyes turned red and he lowered his head. Big drops of tears dripped down his dark face, but he didn't say a word. Everyone noticed that the atmosphere was not right and looked at each other in surprise. The project leader said with a heavy face, his mother died during the Warlords' War. 3 months ago his father was fighting against the dumping of garbage by New World Renewable Energy Company in the North Bay and was shot by the mercenaries in the chaos. Now he's the only one left in his family. I promise I'll get justice for your father. Jiang Tian sighed and patted him on the shoulder. He encouraged, don't worry, this won't happen again. We'll work hard together to protect Sidoni. Li Si nodded heavily and clenched his fists. After checking again, Qinyang said to Li Si and the others before they left, Zhang and Li Si, do you have any requirements for work or life? Just tell me, absolute beginning, will satisfy you. Li Si was flattered. He gathered his courage and looked at Jiang Tian. Absolute beginning, can you give me a protective charm? I heard from Zhang Sen that you drew one for him. I've always been envious. I've written an amulet for you? Jiang Tian looked at Zhang San in confusion. Zhang San immediately averted his gaze. His face was deathly pale and he was so nervous that he was trembling. Qinyang whispered, Master, it's probably the word primordial. How did this become a protective talisman? Jiang Tian was puzzled. Qinyang explained with a bitter smile. Many Sidoni people saw the 2 Chinese characters in the new version of the Divine Book of Creation compiled by Dashiel. They copied them on their bodies and bragged that you wrote them for them. They treat you as an omnipresent and omniscient God. If you have these 2 words on you, it's like you're superior to others. Jiang Tian laughed, patted Zhang Sen's little head and said with a smile, yes, that's right. I did write an amulet for him before. Brush and ink, I will draw one for Li Si too. Zhang San immediately shed tears of gratitude. The absolute beginning divine spirit had saved him, but he still didn't expose his lie. What a merciful divine spirit. He wiped his tears and ran into the makeshift house to bring Jiang Tian white paint and a brush. Jiang Tian took the brush and wrote the word primordial on Li Si's back. Then he rewrote it on Zhang San's body. It will bless you, Jiang Tian said with a smile. Thank you, primordial. Hot tears rolled down the 2 black teenagers' cheeks. They knelt down solemnly and kowtowed. Their faces were extremely sincere, as if they were suddenly filled with power. This was not an illusion or a psychological effect. Jiang Tian's writing technique contained runes and vital essence. The power penetrated their skin and bones. This kind of power could let the 2 of them withstand several bullets. Sidoni was not big and most of it was primitive forest. If one only looked at the cities and the projects under construction, they would finish it in one day. Everywhere Jiang Tian and the others went, they were warmly welcomed by the Black Brothers as if they had seen their savior. In the new residential areas and schools, people lived and worked peacefully. They were full of smiles and yearning for a better life. The public square was filled with greenery and flowers. The environment was beautiful and full of tropical charm. The majestic bridges were like rainbows crossing the heavenly moat, becoming a passageway. Scientifically designed roads and railways extended in all directions, connecting several major cities in the country, forming a convenient transportation network. In Crepe Myrtle Harbor, transport ships of all sizes came and went. Many construction machines came ashore. The San Juan International Airport was luxuriously built. The glass walls shone brightly under the light. There were many small jets and a few large Boeing planes parked at the airport. These were all from the airline company of the Iron Emperor's family. He was now the controller of many international and domestic flights in Sidoni. If the economy recovered in the future and the international aviation industry developed, the Iron Emperor's family would be Sidoni's largest airline company. If it weren't for the bullet holes in the old buildings, the bullet casings in the corners of the streets, and the wrecks of tanks and cars in the junkyard outside the city, anyone who came here would never have imagined that just a few months ago, this place was a hell on earth where war raged and warlords fought. Overall, Zhang Tian was very satisfied with the progress of the project. Good job, comrades. My Sidonie now is much more beautiful than Hawaii. Seeing this, Zhang Tian nodded in approval. In just a few months, the builders had created a brand new Sidonie. In terms of planning and construction quality, many cities were not inferior to the large cities in developed countries. One had to know that Wuxia was known internationally as a construction maniac. In terms of infrastructure construction, no one in the world could compare to it in terms of speed and quality. And the construction team that came to Sidonie were all experienced first-rate construction companies in Wuxia. The funds were in place and the salaries were very high. In addition, the people of Sidonie treated them like gods. How could they not work in full swing? Everyone present felt honored and their eyes were filled with excitement. They only felt that the tiring work of the past few months was worth it. It wasn't easy to get Master Kang's approval. Finally, they arrived at the last stop of the inspection. On Tianqing Mountain. On the secondary peak, everyone saw a group of villas that were full of modern vibes. Thousands of single-family villas were built one after another. The grass was green, the water droplets from the fountain were shining, and the flowers swayed in the wind. What made Qinger even more shocked was that the spirit qi here was dense and milky white spirit qi mist enveloped the entire group of villas. Taking a breath made people feel refreshed as if they were enlightened. Master Kong, Mistress, this is the Xingyuan Immortal Healing Village. Perfected Cultivator Hong Yi introduced respectfully. Although the spirit qi here can't be turned into mist, it's already very rich. It's comparable to the Hidden Dragon Mountain array. Zhao Xueqing's eyes flickered as she sighed with emotion. Yes, Mistress, you are right. Perfected Cultivator Hong Yi sighed. This is a super spirit qi gathering array built according to Master Kang's plan. The array materials alone cost $100 million. Together with the villas, it's $3 billion, which is equivalent to 20 billion Wuxia dollars. This was a huge investment. It was equivalent to building a few hundred Hidden Dragon Mountain arrays in 4 months. Jiang Tian, you really don't care about money anymore. Qinger rolled her eyes at Zhang Tian and clicked her tongue. This is not a money-losing sale. Zhang Tian smiled and then said seriously, there are 1,000 villas here. There are actually different levels, but the cheapest one costs $100 million. We only need to sell 50 of them to make it back. Master Kong is definitely going to make a lot of money from this deal. Perfected Cultivator Hong Yi smiled. As long as it's not a terminal illness, the residents will be nourished by the spirit qi and their illnesses will disappear in half a month. If you live here for a long time, you can even live up to 120 years old. Years ago, Master Kong only extended Guo Shichang's life by 10 years and got 2% of Guo's group's shares, which is equivalent to 20 billion Wuxia dollars, which is more than $1 billion. Perfected Cultivator Hong Yi said confidently. I can guarantee that once these villas are released to the world, the top 2,000 billionaires in the world will flock to Sidonie. I'm just afraid that there won't be enough to sell. Behind him, King Arthur, Chancellor Andrew, President Qinyang and the rest were all excited. With this, Sidonie's economy would be revitalized. No, it should be said that it would take off. In fact, the Heaven Alliance members that Zhang Tian had brought over had already revitalized the economy. The gathering of the world's billionaires would also bring in a lot of investment. With a little push it would take off. Just like what Zhang Tian had said, Sidonie would only need 2 to 3 years to become one of the richest countries in the world, and its per capita GDP would surpass that of the US. The dream that Zhang Tian had described was a little far away, but in fact, it was within reach. After that, they left the secondary peak and walked along the winding mountain road. It was the original highest peak, Mount Surad. It was now called Zhou Xian Peak. There was an endless stretch of majestic palaces built against the mountain, covering an area of hundreds of acres. The palaces had red walls, golden glazed tiles, white marble paving the way and carved beams and painted rafters. It was quite a regal sight. The red lacquered door, which was studded with bowl-sized brass rivets, looked magnificent. On the tall lintel, There was a huge plaque with golden words on a black background. The 3 golden words were written with iron hooks and silver strokes, looking mighty and extraordinary. Taiching sect. Qinger exclaimed as she scanned with her divine sense. These buildings are arranged according to a formation. They can absorb a lot of spirit qi and even have a defensive function. Yes. Hongyi, you've done a great job. Jiang Tian nodded approvingly and looked at Hongyi the Enlightened, whose faces were all red from the sun. Back then Jiang Tian had seen that Hongyi the Enlightened had some talent, so he had casually taught him a few simple formations in the cultivation world. He did not expect that this old man would really study hard and become one of the top formation experts in the Heaven Alliance. Although the formation layout was indeed drawn by Jiang Tian, Hongyi the Enlightened was indeed extraordinary to be able to perfectly construct the formation, implement Jiang Tian's ideas, and exert the full effect of the formation. This formation was now called the Permanent Heavenly Cycle Formation. It could be said that this was the crystallization of Jiang Tian's 10,000 years of cultivation world's formation study. It could be said to be a great and shocking work. Chapter 638. This formation could be used to defend 24 hours a day without interruption. It could withstand the continuous bombardment of artillery shells and the volley of ground-penetrating missiles. Unless a nuclear weapon was born, it would be impossible to destroy it. Its defensive ability was more than 10 times that of the Hidden Dragon Mountain formation. The most important thing was that this formation used Jiang Tian's divine sense as the formation spirit, which was closely connected to Jiang Tian's main divine sense. Even if Jiang Tian was thousands of miles away in any corner of the earth, once the formation was attacked, Jiang Tian would be able to sense it immediately and come to its rescue. Of course, the cost of this formation was not cheap. Just the chalcedony, jade, wood, precious metals and other formation materials alone were worth hundreds of millions of USD. Some of these materials were plundered by Jiang Tian when he attacked cities, while some were purchased by Hongyi and the others over the years. It's all thanks to Master Kang's good teachings. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to reach this level. Hong Ye's face was filled with gratitude. He quickly bowed and said, "Master Kong, please come in. Everyone is waiting." Jiang Tian and his wife walked into the Taiching sect's training hall. There was an inner hall, an outer hall, a pill refining room, a weapon refining room, a library, a cultivation room and a central hall. There were also lush forests and tall bamboos, 9 winding corridors, rockeries, ponds and rivers. The layout was well arranged. Could be said that there was a scenery with every step. Coupled with the misty spiritual energy, it made people feel as if they were walking in a painting. Dozens of green-scaled fire owls soared in the clouds, letting out sharp and cheerful cries. The old dragon was entrenched in a deep pool, lazily drinking fruit juice and basking in the sun. In order to prevent this dragon from being too shocking, Hongyi had set up a concealment formation here. The little monkey was climbing and leaping from tree to tree, followed by a group of native Sidoni monkeys. However, this fellow was very disdainful of them. All of this added a sense of immortal charm to it, and it was like an immortal paradise in the mortal world that was otherworldly. "Greetings, Master Kong." "Greetings, Mistress." In the central main hall. Seeing Jiang Tian walk in, the 5 top grandmasters Huqing Tian, Wei Feilong, Zhao Yuankuan, Wu Yingxiong, Yi Wudao, Huaxia and the leaders of the 6 Yanji martial arts families stood up and bowed to Jiang Tian. Behind them were the Red Boat Master, the Elder of the Snake Witch sect, and a few other elites from the Chinese Society of Singapore. Behind them were Huang Linger, Zhang Wanqing, Yi Ziwei, Xin Mange, Li Jinju and Sasaki Haisha. At the back were Song Jigang of the Fucking Gang, Qin Yang of the Great Circle, Ishi Yulian of the Yamaguchi Group, Shirlei and Qing Linzi. Basically, these were the core members of the Taiching sect. "Everyone rise." Holding hands with Qinga, Jiang Tian sat down on the high seat and asked with a smile, "Has the fleet arrived? How did you arrange it?" "They are now anchored in the waters near the Gulf of Tonkin, ready to give the French Navy a head-on blow," Huqing Tian said respectfully. Everyone clenched their fists and a murderous aura appeared on their faces. It was as if they had a common enemy. They had seen the results of Sidoni's construction. They had already treated this place as their second home. How could they allow the French to treat it as a garbage dump? "Good. Since you are willing to fight to the death, my previous training was not in vain." Jiang Tian nodded approvingly. Those who were willing to fight with him had passed the preliminary test. He smiled and said, "From now on there is no Heaven Alliance, only the Taiqing sect. And you are the core members of the sect. The Taiqing sect is completely different from the Heaven Alliance. The Heaven Alliance is just a loose alliance of interest. Now that the sect has been formed, and you are my disciples, Kong Teichu's disciples, I will bless you and teach you cultivation techniques." Master Kong is finally going to teach us cultivation techniques. That's great. Thank you, faction leader. Everyone was excited and kowtowed to Qin Fan with anticipation in their eyes. It turned out that Jiang Tian was very strict in choosing his disciples. He only had 2 disciples, Tang Linglong and Chen Yang, and half of Yi Zhantian. Tang Linglong had only cultivated for a year, but she had already surpassed the others by decades. She had transformed from an ordinary person to a grandmaster who was as powerful as a transcendent state grandmaster. Jiang Tian had only taught Huqing Tian, Wei Feilong, and Zhao Yuankuan, but they were still able to reach the half-step immortal state. It could be said that no other sect or family in the world was as powerful as Jiang Tian's. Jiang Tian was the most powerful cultivator in Wuxia and the most powerful overlord in the world. Whether it was Zhang Qianlei, Zeus, or the professor, they were all far inferior compared to Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian was also very familiar with the establishment of sections. In his previous life he had created countless sections. Jiang Tian was very clear about the hierarchy between the inner sect, outer sect, elders, hall masters, and disciples. Xin Mange was in charge of the alchemy department. She was in charge of the Xinnong school in Wuxia and was in charge of the Xingyun Immortal Healing Village and the Medicine King group. Jiang Tian gave her a book called Overview of Alchemy. Zhang Qinzhen was in charge of the artifact forging department. Hong Yi, the perfected cultivator, was in charge of the Dharma spell masters of the southern sect in Wuxia. They specialized in array formations and Dharma artifacts. Gu Baixian and his daughter were also in this department. They were also in charge of collecting heavenly materials and earthly treasures and related information for Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian gave them a book called The Secrets of Artifact Forging. The Dharma spell masters of the Chinese society and the Maoshan sect were in charge of the Soul Hall. Jiang Tian gave them a book called 18 Ghost Taming Techniques. The Heavenly Strategy Battalion was the command center of the Heavenly Army. It was led by Huqing Tian and consisted of many martial Dao grandmasters. The Heavenly Strategy Battalion was the strongest military force in the sect. It was also the command center of the sect. It was directly responsible to Jiang Tian. As for the Heavenly Policy Camp, Jiang Tian had bestowed the most. It included the martial technique 36 Heavenly Soldier Forms, the footwork 8 trigrams Dragon Steps, the Song of Righteousness that nourished one's qi, the body tempering technique, and many other cultivation techniques. These cultivation techniques were the culmination of Jiang Tianji's 10,000 years of cultivation and had been carefully improved. Although they were not the best in the cultivation realm, they were the most suitable cultivation techniques for people at their current level. These cultivation techniques could gradually convert martial Dao true qi into true essence, allowing them to quickly break through to the immortal state. These cultivation methods are simply too amazing. So that's how it is. Oh, so this is where I misunderstood. It's like a wake-up call. Amazing. Amazing. You can definitely break through quickly. The immortal state is just around the corner. Everyone was knowledgeable. When they opened the manual and took a look, they couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. They were dumbstruck, moved, and excited. Thank you, Master Kong. You've given us hope to break through to the immortal state. Everyone kowtowed and expressed their gratitude. This is nothing. Jiang Tian tapped his fingers on the armrest and smiled. I've given you the basic cultivation techniques. If you perform well, you'll be rewarded. When the time comes, I'll give you better cultivation techniques, elixirs, and other cultivation resources. Everyone's face lit up again. Master Kang's resources were as vast as the sea and unfathomable. Have you found a pattern in the ranking of your current positions? Jiang Tian said with a smile. Basically, it's based on the order of joining the Heavenly Alliance and the level of cultivation. Huqing Tian said after pondering for a while. Yes. Jiang Tian nodded slightly and said solemnly, but the Taiqing sect is not a place where one can live out one's life by seniority. I won't allow anyone to lie on the merit book and get away with it once and for all. Only the fittest can rise, the mediocre can be relegated, and the incompetent can be relegated. I'll set up a punishment hall and assign a law-enforcing elder to record your performance in the sect, form merit points, and evaluate your merits. If you want better cultivation resources, then fight bravely, work hard, and contribute to the sect. Use your merit points to exchange for merit points. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone became solemn, and a strand of vigilance surged in their hearts. Zhang Tian glanced at everyone and finally fixed his eyes on Sasaki Aisha. He said calmly, Sasaki Aisha will be the law-enforcing elder. She'll be in charge of the punishment hall. What? I'll be the law-enforcing elder? Sasaki Aisha couldn't believe it. She was so excited that her chest rose and fell violently. She didn't expect Zhang Tian to still remember her and give her such an important position. She didn't remember to kowtow to thank him until Huqing Tian urged her. She quickly knelt on the ground and promised passionately, Master Kong, I won't let you down. I'll do my best. Only Huqing Tian and the other experienced people nodded and praised her in their hearts. Zhang Tian took a different approach and dealt with things fairly and rationally. Everyone present was originally an overlord in charge of a region. The major sects and families in Wuxia, as well as the overlords in Nanyang Star Continent, South Korea, and East Asia had complicated relationships. They even had conflicts with each other. It could be said that no matter who was appointed as the law-enforcing elder, there would be people who wouldn't be convinced. But Sasaki Aisha was different. She was very young and a Japanese overlord. She didn't have a close relationship with the major overlords in Wuxia. She stayed out of it and wasn't tied down by emotions. She dealt with things fairly. The above is the inner sect. Zhang Tian said lightly. My disciple Qinyang is in charge of the outer sect. It's mainly for the secular businesses of the Jiang family and the major families, including the Sky Army mercenaries, the fucking gang, the Yamaguchi group, and the Yamaguchi group. You have to maintain contact with the Sidoni government and maintain relationships with countries around the world. Your goal is simple, to make money. Congratulations, senior brother Qinyang. Make more money. Everyone was in a good mood after receiving their own rewards. Seeing Zhang Tian smiling, they couldn't help but laugh and kowtow to thank him. You're welcome. You're my disciples. As long as you work hard and kill the enemy bravely, I, Kong Teichu, will not mistreat anyone. You may leave. Zhang Tian smiled faintly and waved his sleeve, dismissing the crowd. He wasn't exaggerating, nor was he putting on an act. Although cultivation was about having a simple Taoist heart and having few desires, in Zhang Tian's view, it didn't mean that he was heartless and ungrateful. In his previous life, Zhang Tian made great progress. He became an immortal cultivator in 500 years and became the god of Hongmeng in 10,000 years. To have such a stunning achievement, his own talent was extraordinary, painstaking efforts and diligent cultivation were one of the reasons. He also valued relationships and made friends with a lot of geniuses and grand cultivators. He also learned from others. The reason why he died at the critical moment of becoming the god of Hongmeng was because he lost his family and friends before leaving Earth, which caused him to regret. In this life, Zhang Tian valued family and friendship more. His enemies were like ants, so he didn't have to worry about his family and friends. It was indeed hard to move forward without abandoning or giving up, but it made his steps heavier. Chapter 639. After that, Zhang Tian and Qing'er walked into a courtyard hand in hand to see Zhang Qianlei, who was said to be in seclusion. Arthur, why don't you take me as your master? I'll teach you thunder techniques. Look, it's so fun. Zhang Qianlei showed off the lightning snakes on his fingertips, like a weird uncle who was tempting children with lollipops. I want to learn how to be a king first, then I'll learn cultivation techniques. Little Arthur shook his head, his clear eyes full of fear. Why did he feel that Zhang Tianxia was threatening him? Brat, your father Zhang Tian didn't invite me to join the Taiqing sect when he established it. Do you know why? Zhang Qianlei said calmly. I don't know. Little Arthur shook his head in confusion. Let me tell you, your father Zhang's cultivation is not as powerful as mine. He's afraid that I'll overshadow him and replace him. Zhang Qianlei said proudly. Cough cough. Old Zhang, you're really good at fantasizing now. What's the point of scaring a child? Jiang Tian said mockingly as he walked in with large strides and coughed. Old Jiang, what nonsense are you talking about? Zhang Qianlei blushed and glared. When did this Taoist grandpa scare him? Many people want to take me as their master, but I don't agree. Don't you want a flying sword? Here. Jiang Tian was too lazy to talk nonsense. He took out dozens of disposable flying swords from his storage ring. Among them was a second-generation disposable flying sword that could fly many times. Whoa. This one should be able to fly. Old Jiang, I didn't misjudge you, you're really something. Zhang Qianlei excitedly took the second-generation disposable flying sword. He immediately loved it and was eager to try it out. What's the hurry? You have to refine it first. It's still my divine sense. Jiang Tian reminded him with a smile. Old Jiang, you have to change your bad habit of looking down on people. This Taoist grandpa is proficient in all 5 profound techniques of the Tao sect. How could he not know this? Zhang Qianlei smiled proudly, rolled his eyes at Jiang Tian and immediately got busy. However, his spirit sacrifice method was much more primitive. It was the most primitive and lowest-level blood sacrifice method. When Jiang Tian taught him other sacrificial refining techniques, he was still reluctant to learn them. However, although the blood sacrifice technique was primitive, it had the advantage of being closely connected and being able to be controlled freely. After he was done, Zhang Qianlei stepped onto his flying sword in high spirits and flew around the training hall with a whoosh. After flying for half an hour and being urged by Jiang Tian several times, Zhang Qianlei finally returned to the dojo. He reluctantly got off the flying sword and gave a thumbs up. Compared to riding on clouds, the flying sword can stay in the air for a much longer time, and it can even break through 2 times the speed of sound. Most importantly, it doesn't consume any of the user's Xianxia. Not bad. That's right. At least in the aspect of refining artifacts, this Taoist is inferior to you. I'm sincerely convinced. Zhang Qianlei was immediately infuriated when he saw Jiang Tian's smile that was not a smile. He withdrew his smile, raised his chin and said proudly, however, in other aspects, old Jiang, you might not be able to compare to me. Can you stop arguing about this? The enemy is right in front of us. Can you put away your vanity? Jiang Tian frowned. What enemy is right in front of us? Zhang Qianlei had been in a small-scale closed-door training recently, and he was a mischievous person. He knew nothing about the Northern Gulf incident. Jiang Tian explained it concisely. Zhang Qianlei immediately flew into a rage and said angrily, "Isn't France the bad country that burned down the summer palace and drove away the Empress Dowager? Why is it still so bad in the 21st century? I'll go and kill them." Old Jiang, I don't want to criticize you, but you are too cowardly. How could you let them live until now? With our ability we can smash Buckingham Palace and kill them in minutes. Celestial Master Zhang, Buckingham Palace is England's. Little King Arthur reminded him weakly. Do you think I don't know? I'm also very knowledgeable. Zhang Qianlei's face turned red. He glared at little Arthur and shouted, the 8-nation alliance is no good. We are all jackals of the same tribe. Of course we have to kill them together. Jiang Tian was too lazy to listen to his nonsense. He quickly interrupted, Brother Lei, we are establishing a country. We have to act according to international law. We have to be polite before resorting to force. Let me tell you, if you want to kill people and fight a war, you can do it. Do you see these dozens of wooden swords? Jiang Tian pointed to the other flying swords and said, the Heaven Thunder Bamboo is not bad. It is the first generation of disposable flying swords. Its speed can break the sound barrier and fly thousands of kilometers. These junk will be useless after one use. I don't like it. I like flying swords. Zhang Qianlei held his hands behind his back and shook his head proudly. Obviously he had some taste. Idiot. Can you not be so arrogant? Jiang Tian frowned and said, let me tell you, this is very useful. Together with your Thunder Talisman, it will turn your Thunder Talisman from a close-range attack into a long-range attack weapon. Its lethality will surpass that of cruise missiles. So this is why you asked me to make the Thunder Talisman. Zhang Qianlei touched the groove on the tail of the disposable flying swords and nodded in admiration. This is good. Old Jiang, you are really ruthless and insidious. Soon Zhang Qianlei inserted the Thunder Talisman into the groove one by one. After refining it with his spiritual force, The dozens of disposable flying swords instantly turned into long-range thunder-type magic weapons. By the way, remember when the time comes, attack the command system of the ship. Don't be in a hurry to kill. Zhang Tian exhorted. If you destroy their command system, they will be lambs for you to slaughter. That's not challenging at all. It's not interesting at all. Zhang Qianlei frowned. He was unwilling to be so opportunistic. Please, this is not a joke. This is a war. Don't underestimate the power of modern weapons. Zhang Tian said solemnly, you are only a half-step human immortal now. You have not reached the point where your body is indestructible. Who knows, maybe a cruise missile will knock you down. All right, I got it. I will go to the sea and wait for those bastards. Zhang Qianlei carried dozens of disposable flying swords on his back and stepped onto the second-generation disposable flying sword. This old man has no sense of organization and discipline at all. Seeing this, Zhang Tian shook his head helplessly. Don't worry. Although Mr. Zhang's personality is a bit explosive, he is actually very smart. Nothing will happen to him, Qing'er said with a smile. While talking, the two of them entered the inner courtyard. The so-called inner courtyard was a courtyard deep in the inner sect. The spiritual qi was denser and there were 3 layers of formations. This was the residence of Zhang Tian and his family. Naturally, Zhang Tian would not allow the slightest mishap. Except for Dad, everyone is here. Zhang Tian looked at Zhao Xueqing, Zhang Wanqing, Yi Ziwei, Huang Linger and Jiang Chongqing and said with a smile. Your father is a fan of government officials. He is already 50 years old. How many more years can he work? I have scolded him a lot. Zhang Wanqing said angrily. Wasn't it good to be the president or secretary of state in Sidoni? Why did he have to stay in Wuxia to be a city hall official? No, Dad has his own value system. Besides, he has not neglected his cultivation. Zhang Tian said. This time, my main purpose is to improve everyone's cultivation again. Everyone will improve by 1 level. Zhang Tian poured out 2 red pills, 1 big and 1 small, and gave one to Qing'er and Linger. Guizhong Cauldron Pill? Ling-er exclaimed. That's right. This is the Guizhong Cauldron Pill made from the Immortal Ascension Blood Arrow Orchid. I wish each of you a breakthrough within a day. Qing'er smiled. Why is mine bigger but Ling-er's smaller? Don't be biased. It's not that I'm biased. Zhang Tian laughed involuntarily. Ling-er is still in the early stage of qi refinement. He can't take too much. Otherwise it will backfire. Zhao Xueqing smiled. Huang Linger interrupted, but you took a month to break through last time. Why are we faster? Zhang Tian said with a smile, I will guide you to open your meridians and strengthen your bodies. With the help of external forces, of course it will be faster. Hehe, I am breaking through. That is qi refinement level 8, higher than your cultivation. Don't be jealous. Qing'er said with a teasing smile. I am happy to see it happen. Zhang Tian said with a carefree smile. The two of you are my right-hand men. The stronger your cultivation, the better. The two of them entered 2 quiet cultivation rooms and sat cross-legged. They swallowed the pills and slowly refined them according to the method Zhang Tian taught them. They were still refining the pills and were not at the critical stage of breaking through, so Zhang Tian was not allowed to interfere. Zhang Tian led Jiang Chongqing, Yi Ziwei and his mother into another quiet room and said with a smile, I'm sorry. Before this, you all cultivated according to the method I taught you. After more than a year of cultivation, Grandpa is now at qi refinement level 3. Mom and Sister Ziwei's cultivation is lower, at qi refinement level 1. No matter what, you all have made good progress and have reached the early stage of qi refinement. Now I'm going to teach you a real cultivation method, Cloud Sea Azure Dragon technique. It will be refined with the qi nourishing pill. Cloud Sea Azure Dragon technique? A real cultivation method? Wasn't it before? The 3 of them looked at each other and found it strange. The 3 pure foundation building technique that you cultivated before is an immortal cultivation method. It is best for cultivating the mind and is also suitable for cultivating the body. Zhang Tian said with a smile, but the Cloud Sea Azure Dragon technique is a real cultivation method. At the qi refinement level, especially when combined with great medicine and spirit qi, it is most effective. You can advance by leaps and bounds. When you don't have the pills, you can still cultivate the 3 pure foundation building technique. In actual combat, each of you can use the martial arts I taught you before. This is not contradictory. In fact, both the 3 pure foundation building technique and the Cloud Sea Azure Dragon technique were top cultivation methods. They were all-encompassing, vast, and unfathomable. Even in the cultivation world, it was a great opportunity for any cultivator to obtain a cultivation method. The reason why Zhou Xian was so eager for quick success was that he had thought far ahead. Whether it was searching for the ruins of immortality or other paths, the ultimate goal was to set foot on the ancient path of the stars, enter the cultivation world and conquer the Sea of Stars. In this life, Zhou Xian did not allow himself to have any regrets. He wanted to take his family on the path of cultivation and live for 10,000 years to accompany each other in love. From the information he had obtained so far, there would be a lot of experts in the ruins of immortality. If they wanted to obtain cultivation resources, they would inevitably be bathed in blood. That would not be the magnitude of the battle now. It would be 10 times or 100 times more dangerous. And after setting foot on the ancient path of the stars, there would be cosmic rifts, cosmic storms that could destroy foundation establishment experts, and the movement of stars and sunspots, etc. Without a strong cultivation, it would be impossible to pass through safely. Because of this, Zhou Xian had to improve their cultivation as soon as possible. He could not have a weak soldier under his command. Chapter 640. This pill is called the Qi Nourishing Pill. I made it with the leaves of the wind bellgrass and the immortal ascension blood arrow orchid. Zhou Xian took out a porcelain bottle. There were dozens of crystal-clear, jade-like pills in it. He poured out 3 pills and gave one to each of them. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "This is not because I dote on my wife and don't care about you. This pill is not as powerful as the Guizhong Cauldron pill, but it's most suitable for you to refine. Different pills are suitable for each level of cultivation. You can't eat them randomly or you won't be able to control them. Besides, I still have a lot of Guizhong Cauldron pills. You can take them when you reach the later stage of qi refining." "Kid, don't you think your explanation is a little redundant?" Zhang Wanqing looked at him and said with a smile, "As long as you love them, I'm happy." Zhang Tian chuckled and said, "All right, take the pills and refine them. I'll teach you cultivation techniques. You're so busy. There's something I've been hiding in my heart for a long time. I must tell you today when I'm free." Zhang Wanqing waved her hand and said, "What's wrong with Qing'er? I've mentioned preparing for pregnancy more than once. She was quite enthusiastic before, but now she seems to be addicted to cultivation. She refuses every time." Zhang Tian said seriously, "Mom, she's gradually developing the mindset of a cultivator. This is a good thing. I don't care. In my opinion, cultivation is no different from making money." Zhang Wanqing was very angry about this. She exploded and said angrily, "You're doing this for the sake of work and not children. Have you considered the feelings of us old people? You've been fighting and killing all day long. To put it bluntly, if you die one day, then our bloodline will have no more descendants." His mother's words weren't pleasant to hear, but Zhang Tian could sense her deep worry. Zhang Tian smiled and said gently, Don't worry, Mom. We will definitely take this matter seriously and put it on the agenda as soon as possible. What I mean is, if she doesn't want to have children, don't make things difficult for her and linger." Zhang Wanqing said with a strange expression, "I heard that you don't live up to your name at all. What are you doing? If we haven't slept together, can I still be considered your woman?" Seeing Zhang Tian looking over, Yiziwei waved her hand and said, "Zhang Tian, don't look at me. I didn't say anything." Zhang Tian judged from various details that his mother actually liked Huang Linger more than Qing'er, except for Qing'er's recent reluctance to have children. Also, back then when he was in Linzhou, Qing'er had kept it a secret from his mother even though he had become crazy due to alcohol poisoning. This matter had always been a thorn in his mother's heart. Another reason was her personality. After Qing'er cultivated the stainless phoenix immortal physique, she became even more aloof and did not like to talk. She was not as innocent as Huang Linger, and her personality was very likable. But what Zhang Tian wanted was for the family to prosper, so he helplessly smiled. "Mom, don't worry about it. I have my own plans." How did cultivation turn into a family criticism meeting? Okay, swallow the elixir and calm down. Okay, I won't scold you, but you have to be more careful. Zhang Wanqing sighed helplessly and could only swallow the elixir. As the three of them swallowed the elixir, Jiang Tian's divine sense moved, and the small golden lake between his eyebrows flickered. At the same time, the three of them were shocked to find that large golden characters appeared in their minds. These large characters seemed to be cast in gold. They were so dense that they seemed to have substance. They emitted thousands of rays of bright golden light, carrying with them an ancient and mysterious aura, as if they had crossed over time and floated over from the Desolation era. There were a total of 81 golden characters, forming a great work, the Azure Dragon Cloud Sea Technique. This was a type of language from the immortal realm. Each word was a gem and it could describe supreme techniques. It contained the secrets of the universe and could even produce the sound of the great Tao. Although everyone saw the same words, they would have different understandings based on their own experience, aptitude, and personality. In the end, they would stimulate their potential to the greatest extent and improve their cultivation. Comprehend the technique and refine the elixir. Jiang Tian's eyes were slightly cold as he lightly shouted, "This is amazing!" Following his instructions to comprehend the technique, the three of them were ecstatic as if they had seen the heavenly Buddha kingdom. They were intoxicated and their hearts were far away. Suddenly, the Azure Dragon Cloud Sea Technique began to circulate in their bodies. White clouds of spirit chi shrouded the three of them. The milky white spirit chi was like clouds and mist, dense and floating, enveloping their bodies and changing in an instant. It made them look like immortals with an ethereal temperament and a solemn appearance. Jiang Tian, it hurts. Is this chi deviation? At this time the three of their bones crackled and the pain went deep into their bones. Their minds were buzzing as if a large amount of hot oil had been poured into them. They had a splitting headache. Don't be afraid. Jiang Tian raised his sword-like eyebrows. While casting a spell to guide the young man, he said earnestly, "This is a rebirth, a cleansing of the body and at the same time a divine sense. Just endure it." The three of them were all strong-willed people. They gritted their teeth and persevered, desperately activating the technique. As the technique circulated, streams of black viscous liquid seeped out from the surface of their bodies, emitting a pungent smell. At this time it could be seen that Jiang Chongging's life was full of ups and downs, and he already knew his destiny. His temperament was the strongest. Yi Ziwei's life experience was wandering, and she lost her parents when she was young. Her temperament was also strong, but Zhang Wanqing was the weakest. It was no wonder. She was born in a big family in Yanjin and lived a happy life. She only experienced some twists and turns in marriage and entrepreneurship, and her temperament was not tempered. Very good. This time, Grandpa will be able to break through to the mid-stage of Qi refinement. Sister Ziwei and Mom will also be able to break through to the mid-stage of Qi refinement. Seeing that the impurities in the three of them were expelled and the technique circulated in an orderly manner, Jiang Tian also heaved a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat on his forehead. At this time he was very tired. The exhaustion on his mind was no less than that of the battle with Zeus and the other overlords. The main reason was that these were his loved ones and he was pouring his heart and soul into it. Seeing this, Jiang Tian went to Qinger and Linger's cultivation room and began to guide and protect the two girls. The guidance and protection of the two girls was smoother, and Jiang Tian also felt relaxed. After all, Qinger's constitution was the supreme immortal body of the stainless phoenix, and Ling also had the Yi-wood spirit root. They were talented and had a foundation in cultivation. 2 days later in the evening, Zhao Xueqing had already touched the edge of Qi refinement stage 8 and was faintly showing signs of a breakthrough. Huang Linger had also comprehended the second round of the divine withering technique, and her combat power was equivalent to the mid-stage of Qi refinement. Boom! Boom! At this time in the inner courtyard of the Jiang family, an old man in a white brocade training suit was jumping up and down and practicing a fist technique. This old man's fist technique was exquisite. Sometimes, it was like a hidden dragon in the abyss, sometimes a wild beast running and sometimes a phoenix dancing in the sky. He was like a saint who praised the righteousness of the world with his backbone, or a peerless king who killed in all directions with violent power. Jiang Chongging was practicing his fist technique after the breakthrough. This was the king's fist of the Sacred Heart. Zoosh. Meanwhile, on the other side of the open field, Zhang Wanqing raised her brows. The autumn water-like long sword shot out like a silver snake, and the sharp blade chi pierced through the air. Boom! A human-shaped boulder 100 meters away in the courtyard shattered. The sword art of raising eyebrows is really powerful. If I had this level of cultivation, I would not have been able to withstand Lang Kuan's attack. Zhang Wanqing looked at the autumn water sword that Jiang Tian had made for her in disbelief and exclaimed, "Mother, how can Brother Tian's cultivation art not be powerful? He said that you could easily kill a transcendent grandmaster after the breakthrough." Yiziwei smiled and said, "Let's see the effect of your breakthrough." Zhang Wanqing held the sword upside down and retreated to the side with a joyful smile. Yiziwei took a few steps forward and stepped into the air as if she was walking on flat ground. While he was in midair, he threw out a palm strike. With a loud explosion, a fake mountain was reduced to dust. "Granny Shi, are Master Kong and the others still in seclusion?" Meanwhile, Qin Yang and the others hurried into the room. Their faces were filled with anxiety. "What's wrong?" Zhang Wanqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Qin Yang was almost 40 years old. He should have called her big sister. "I have just received a report. The French Marine Fleet is heading south from the Atlantic Ocean. Their target might be Sidonie." Qin Yang's forehead was covered with sweat. Qin Yang was one of the most powerful men in the circle. However, he was still a fool when facing the French Marine Fleet. The French Marine Fleet? Zhang Wanqing's eyes narrowed. The French Marine Fleet is definitely a dark horse among the world's special forces. Qin Yang said. In 2008, the Sidonie pirates once kidnapped hostages. In April and September, they rescued 332 hostages and killed hundreds of pirates. They didn't suffer any casualties. Besides, this fleet is very mysterious. We only know that there are 3,000 of them. No one knows the details of their equipment. We don't have satellites, so we don't know their situation yet. Jiang Tian is still in seclusion. He said it would be 3 days, but no one knows for sure. Maybe 10 days or half a month. Yiziwei frowned and said, "I suggest you don't wait for Jiang Tian to come out of seclusion. Decide for yourselves." Decide for yourselves? Qin Yang and Huqing Tian were confused. Zhang Wanqing was calm. She smiled and said, "Since Jiang Tian has handed over the government and the army to you, it means that he has full trust in you. You must have the ability to be independent. The French fleet is sailing on the high seas. It's not against international law." A faint voice resounded clearly in everyone's minds. Every word was sonorous like an emperor's order. It had unquestionable authority. Master Kang's voice. It's the sect leader. When they heard Grandmaster Zhang's voice transmission, everyone's expressions couldn't help but turn solemn, and they all bowed and cupped their fists before standing solemnly and listening without missing a single word. The 2-week deadline is almost up. This is the last warning. If they don't open fire, you have to open fire. Let's show the whole world that they can't afford to mess with Sony. Let's do it. Lucian shouted. Jiang Tian's tone was very calm and did not contain the slightest trace of anger, but it was extremely domineering and powerful. Chapter 641. Sky Troop Fleet. Cooperate with Zhang Qianlei and sail to the Atlantic Ocean at full speed to intercept the French Marine Corps' fleet. Also, remember to bring the New World's garbage ships to the French port. When the time comes, I will give France a big gift. The Green Scale Fire Owl battle team is our trump card. Don't reveal it for now. Guard Sidonie's North Bay area. Just fight. Don't be afraid. With me here, not to mention a small French Marine Corps, even if the entire French Army, Navy and Air Force is mobilized, even if the European Union coalition army comes out in full force, it will only be a matter of my sword. Jiang Tian gave simple orders one by one, but they had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. Yes. Sect Master. Everyone was in high spirits as they received the order. When the French Marine Corps went out to battle, it was not sneaky but with great fanfare. At the same time as the French Marine Corps went out to battle, French President Sanchi was interviewed by French national television and made a strong statement in the media. There is no doubt that this is another vicious terrorist incident of Sidonie's pirates kidnapping innocent people. The French government will never let such bad behavior go unchecked. We will give them a head-on blow. The host asked, "Mr. President, this is a military operation carried out by Sidonie's new government army. We do not recognize the legal status of Sidoni's government. In fact, they are just a dictatorial government formed by illegal organizations controlled by some rich and powerful people in developed countries. President Xianxia said arrogantly. They use primitive and backward primordial gods to confuse the people, control their thoughts and implement dictatorial rule. We hope that this military operation can not only rescue the hostages, but also overthrow their dictatorial regime and liberate the suffering people of Sidoni. Primordial gods? The host asked. Yes. They worship the primordial gods. Obviously, this is fake and also a means of mind control. President Xianxia said disdainfully. And the current president of Sidoni, Qianyang, is just a notorious gangster who has engaged in drug trafficking, human trafficking and international arms smuggling. Such a dictator can only bring poverty and disaster to Sidoni. Then are you confident in this military operation? The host asked cooperatively. Of course. President Assange smiled charmingly. The Marines are our trump card. They have defeated Sidoni's pirates many times. They have a wealth of experience in rescuing hostages and coastal warfare. As for Sidoni, they were just a group of primitive tribes. I believe that the innocent hostages will soon return to the embrace of the motherland. After the interview, the TV station also broadcast the shocking scene of the French Marine fleet to the world. One after another, Rafale fighter jets soared into the sky, and helicopters with all kinds of heavy weapons hovered in the air. Equipped with all kinds of advanced weapons and equipment, the Marines quickly boarded the ship. The tricolor flag fluttered in the wind. More than a dozen destroyers, frigates, cruisers, amphibious landing ships, and other ships formed a fleet. They were extraordinarily mighty and domineering. Like giant steel whales, they pushed open the waves and set off from the base toward the southern part of the Atlantic Ocean. 3,000 soldiers pointed their swords at the small African nation of Sidoni. When the news came out, the whole world was in an uproar. Many media outlets followed up with their reports. Military programs even set up special columns to pay close attention to this matter. Military experts made sand table deductions and gave comments. Why didn't France hide their military strength but attacked with great fanfare? Someone asked. Modern military deterrence has two strategies and ideas. One is to hide the knife behind one's back, not letting the enemy know how powerful one is, and not daring to launch a military attack on oneself. This is a defensive deterrence. The other is to brazenly show the sword. Let the enemy know of their advanced weapons and military strength, shake their morale and even make them disarm and surrender. This is an offensive military threat. A military expert interpreted this way. A French Ministry of Defense expert analyzed. In our view, Sidoni doesn't have a navy at all. If the previous pirates weren't an army, they didn't have the qualifications and strength to fight against the French navy. The reason why France is so strong is that they hope to peacefully resolve this dispute and urge the Sidoni government to immediately release the hostages. Righteousness was righteousness, strength was strength. Although many military commentators sympathized with the suffering Sidoni, they were still pessimistic about this war. Sidoni only has about 400,000 citizens. Excluding the children and the elderly, there are only a few 100,000 people in the prime of their lives. A Pentagon strategist regretfully expressed in an interview with the media. But France's active military has 260,000 soldiers. Even if all Sidoni citizens were soldiers, it wouldn't be half of the French army. Moreover, France's military industry is very strong, second only to the United States, United Kingdom and Russia. Their defense industry exports reached €800,000 just in 2009. This kind of military export performance is very good. Their Rafale fighter jets have shined in actual combat. They also have aircraft carrier battle groups, cruise missiles, intercontinental missiles and so on. This strategist helplessly shook his head and said, to use an inappropriate analogy, Sidoni going to war with France is like a 3-year-old child challenging boxing champion Mike Tyson. It's a very unwise move. It's clear that the reason why France sent out the Marine Corps instead of the Atlantic Fleet is not only to rescue the hostages, but also to land. Sidoni might face a disaster. A European Union military expert said with certainty. But there were also dissenting voices. I think this war between France and Sidoni is different from the war between Britain and the United States and Iraq. I boldly predict that Sidoni can hold on for at least 3 months. His Excellency Director, who once became a laughingstock in the war between Britain and the United States and Iraq, said so in an interview with Wuxia CCTV. But Sidoni is extremely backward. It's one of the poorest countries in Africa and the world. It doesn't have modern weapons. The female host didn't give him any face and said, and back then, Iraq was known as the 3rd strongest military power in the world, even surpassing Wuxia. It has 5,000 tanks, 8,000 armored vehicles, 3,500 artillery, more than 500 fighter jets and thousands of missiles. Is this something that Sidoni can compare with? This time the French Marine Corps has sent out an entire fleet. This is no less than the British and American coalition forces in the war against Iraq. I think this kind of strength comparison. We can't look at new things with old eyes. His Excellency Director smiled mysteriously and said, I believe that the reason why Sidoni is so strong must be because they have a trump card. Let's wait and see. Director of War Deception, as expected of the Director of War Deception. These words are simply enigmatic confidence. Where is your basis? As soon as these words came out in the eyes of military fans around the world, His Excellency Director suddenly became notorious and became the biggest joke. In their opinion, for the poor and backward Sidoni to want to win was tantamount to a fool's dream. When the French Marine Corps went to war in Paris, a large number of far-right people in France gathered, marched and reveled in the streets. Beside the Seine River on the Place de la Concorde, under the Arc de Triomphe, Parisian citizens were everywhere. They sang all night and set up tents on the streets, waiting for the Marine Corps heroes to return in triumph, capture Kong Techu alive, and strangle the president and senior cabinet officials. Sidoni, why do you have such confidence in a place where even birds don't shit? How dare you try to hit a rock with an egg? How stupid. Wasn't there a rumor on Twitter some time ago that Sidoni has a few real gods? It's called the God of Absolute Beginning. As I saw it too. It must have been done by the dictatorial government on purpose by a special effects company to confuse the people. That's the poorest country in the world. It's barbaric, primitive, poor and backward. The illiteracy rate is 90%. They are easily confused by this kind of thinking. Such a country dares to provoke the powerful French Republic. It's like an ant trying to shake a tree. They were extremely disdainful of Sidoni. In their eyes, this war was like a big joke. Was there a need to fight Sidoni? A warship would be enough to scare them to the point of peeing their pants. Not only in Paris but also in Marseille, Lyon, Toulouse. The streets and squares of all the major cities in France were filled with people. Bonfires were lit, songs were sung and red, white and blue flags were waving. Everyone was protesting and speaking, protesting Sidoni's kidnapping of hostages, protesting the American bigwigs supporting Sidoni, protesting their control of oil and minerals, their promotion of global hegemony, protesting the construction of too many nuclear power plants, protesting everything. It must be known that the French people had always been veterans of the revolution. Their revolutionary tradition could even be traced back to 1789. That year the people of Paris rushed into the Bastille and destroyed a huge dynasty. In addition, rock and roll, drinking, taking drugs, revelry and casual sex were everywhere. But the ones who protested the most were Sidoni's pirates. They raised banners and shouted slogans at the top of their lungs. They said that they would carry out a military decapitation operation to execute the terrorist leader Xianxia and the dictator Kong Techu by hanging. Breakthrough. In the quiet room, Jiang Tian was overjoyed. Qing'er had broken through to the 8th level of qi refinement stage. Her cultivation was more than 10 times stronger than before. And Ling had also broken through to the middle stage of qi refinement stage. She had started the 3rd reincarnation of the divine withering glory technique. Jiang Tian, I just sensed with my divine sense. Qin Yang said that the French Navy is going to attack Sidoni? Zhao Xueqing held Jiang Tian's hand and said, That's right. But this is very good. It just gives us a chance to test ourselves. Jiang Tian said with a smile. Is there going to be a war? Huang Linger muttered to herself. Her heart was pounding and her palms were sweating. Although her cultivation was strong, she had not killed a single person so far. Now that the two countries were at war, there would definitely be rivers of blood. For a moment her heart almost jumped out of her throat. Zhao Xueqing nodded heavily. She smiled sweetly and said, I feel that my body, mind, and cultivation technique are all unparalleled. If I don't use them now, I might explode. Okay, now that the garbage ships of the New World are about to arrive at the French port, let's split up. Jiang Tian said, I will attack the heartland of France and destroy the Élysée Palace and the army. Qing'er will cut off the connection between the other fleets and the Marine Corps in the English Channel and intercept the French Air Force that tries to attack Sidonie. Zhang Qianlei and our Sky Army fleet will work together to finish off the Marine Corps in the Pacific. Chapter 642. Sister Qing, this time I want to fight alongside you. Seeing Jiang Tian and Zhao Xueqing so eager to fight, Huang Linger made up her mind and requested. Linger, you can't use your divine art of withering at sea. Stay in the jungle of Sidonie's North Bay. Jiang Tian already had a plan in mind. He patted Linger's head and comforted her with a smile. Linger, don't be afraid and don't feel guilty. The one who should feel guilty is the French government. Weak countries have no sovereignty and no diplomacy. What is martial arts? Using weapons to stop wars. Peace is never something that falls from the sky. It is something that is earned by oneself. It is built on the foundation of strong military force. After this battle, no country in the world will disturb Sidonie anymore. I understand. Huang Linger's eyes flashed with determination as she nodded heavily. After a while, the three turned into 3 streams of light, one gold, one red and one green, and flew towards the north of Sidonie. The French marine fleet was well equipped. A fleet of 13 destroyers, frigates, cruisers, patrol ships and amphibious landing ships was moving towards Sidonie at a speed of 40 knots. What a boring battle. On a Mistral-class amphibious assault ship at the front of the fleet, a French soldier yawned and said listlessly, that idiot president actually sent out all the Marines against a small African country. This is like a joke. He had a big beard, a messy military appearance and a hideous scar on his face. His nickname was Scar Jean-Paul. The soldiers around him were the same. Some of them were listening to music on their iPods, some were lying lazily on their beds and some were watching Playboy with great interest. Most of them were slovenly with big beards and tattoos on their arms. They looked like a group of gangsters. Being slovenly was considered a violation of the rules in the regular army. But for the special elites, it was a privilege and glory that they enjoyed exclusively. Yeah. The Sidonie pirates can't even withstand a single blow. Beside him, a soldier with tattoos on his arms agreed. He had participated in many anti-terrorism wars and was very experienced. Therefore he was very proud. At this time suddenly the sirens started wailing. A fleet is ahead. Please prepare for battle. The commander's order was transmitted to the ears of every soldier through the command system on the ship. What? Sidonie has a fleet? I've never heard of it. How is that possible? Everyone was shocked and they all went to their battle stations. After a while they saw it through their binoculars. More than a dozen battleships surrounded an aircraft carrier. It was like a moving continent flying over quickly. An aircraft carrier. Oh my God. And so many fighter jets, this is too scary. Paul's eyes widened as he looked at the fleet in the distance through the periscope. Could it be Sidonie's? It's to Sidonie. It's Sidonie. Should we open fire? The other soldiers also sucked in a breath of cold air. They never thought that Sidonie, a country that was so poor that it didn't have pants to wear, would have an aircraft carrier battle group. This was not inferior to the strength of the Marine Corps. Don't be nervous. There seems to be a new world garbage transport ship in the fleet. Did Sidonie return the ship? The tattooed soldier comforted himself. The higher-ups also informed that the crisis had been resolved. This fleet was indeed Sidonie's. But it was indeed as everyone guessed. They were going to return the hostages and garbage transport ship in the New World. In this regard, President Sidonie Mr. Chen Yong had already spoken to the media. However, according to the orders of the higher-ups, the Marine Corps still had to advance in the direction of Sidonie until Sidonie announced the end of the military operation. 3 minutes later, the fleet brushed past them 10 nautical miles away. Yes. They must be scared and want to return the ship to us. Someone laughed. Bah. Let me come here for nothing. That's right. These black guys and gangsters don't dare to do anything to us. A French soldier spat fiercely. It seems that this battle is not going to happen. Paul complained bitterly. He was very disappointed. If there was a war, he could easily make contributions and get a generous bonus. Maybe he could buy a house in the center of Paris and move there from the suburbs. At the same time, President Sidoni, Mr. Chen Yang, summoned many media outlets to speak to the world. In the news, he said with a sad face, "We are about to return all the ships and crew in the new world. We deeply regret this." The global media reported this incident as a joke. Major General Zhang's title as the director of the War Deception Department was firm. It seemed that there was no hope of removing it. After another half a day of sailing, several garbage transport ships from the New World finally docked at the French port of Bordeaux and returned to the arms of their motherland. In the end, Sidoni's military no longer had any ships to carry out the escort mission. All the ships did not dare to enter the French territorial waters at all. When they were still hundreds of nautical miles away from France, they immediately returned dejectedly. After receiving this news, on the shore and docks of the Bordeaux port, thousands of right-wing Parisians gathered. The French local media had also arrived. They were cheering, singing, and scolding the Sidoni warships that left. They also raised their middle fingers in disdain in the direction of Sidoni. "These black men don't leave if you have the guts. These days we've been abused inhumanely." On the New World's transport ship, a crew member shouted angrily, "I'm finally back. The call girls in the Rue Saint-Denis and the Vincennes Forest are already waiting for me." A few black men who grew up in the garbage dump and a group of yellow-skinned monkeys from Wuxia. They're just a motley crew. How dare they be enemies with the French Republic? Cowards. Humph, let our great navy beat them to tears. What bullshit primordial gods. Facts have proven that they don't dare to fight against the French army. That's just superstition. Only the backward Wuxia and Sidoni would think that there are gods. Catch the dictator Kong Techu and hang him. Many of the New World sailors felt like victorious generals, flaunting their prowess and cursing. "What are you so happy about?" Suddenly, a skilled and authentic French voice exploded in the sky like rolling thunder. This voice was extremely high-pitched, like the descent of divine thunder from the 9 heavens. It shook the heads of thousands of people within a radius of several kilometers. "What's that?" "It's emitting a dazzling golden light." "Is it a UFO?" "It's a person. It's so strange. He didn't step on anything. Maybe he's filming a movie with wires. Maybe it's a portable aircraft. France's technology is really advanced." Everyone looked up and was dumbfounded. They saw a tall and imposing figure standing in the air like a god overlooking all living beings. For a moment, many people on the shore and on the ship were discussing and clicking their tongues in amazement. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold as he said faintly, "Sidoni said that all the ships of the New World would be returned, but he didn't say how it would be returned. He didn't say that military action would not be taken. I've reminded you before that if you don't compensate and hand over the Rothschild scum, I will make France pay 1,000 times, 10,000 times the price. Do you think I'm joking? What is he talking about? Idiot. Why is his voice so loud? Did he use a loudspeaker? My ears are buzzing. Damn it. He must have installed a secret aircraft to disguise himself as a god, right? Where are our armed helicopters? Why don't we shoot him to death?" Most of the people on the shore and on the ship were puzzled and looked at the scene in the sky with amusement. And some of the crew members who had seen Jiang Tian destroy the black skeleton at a close distance were all stunned, not daring to move. Only Jason, the captain of the New World's transport fleet who had seen Jiang Tian with his own eyes, had a dull and tragic smile on his face. Then he let out a hoarse exclamation. "Silly children, run. He is the god of Sidoni. A real god. Run." Boom. When they finally came to their senses, the crew member seemed to have gone crazy. They increased the speed of the transport ship to the extreme and approached the shore. But it was too late. Jiang Tian took the sky-devouring magic gourd from his waist and unscrewed the cork. He activated his divine sense and dharma power. Suddenly, the mouth of the sky-devouring magic gourd emitted a deep black light, as if it could connect to a black hole in the depths of the universe. Boom. The water surface shook violently and rolled up rolling waves. A transport ship with a displacement of hundreds of tons suddenly left the water surface and slowly rose into the air. This was a shocking scene. The large transport ship, which was more than 100 meters long and looked like a small mountain, flew off the ground uncontrollably and drifted into the void. Ouch! Help! Help! Amid the hoarse screams, the crew members fell into the water one by one and passed out instantly. Those who fell on the shore or other ships were even more miserable. They were directly smashed into meat paste. The transport ship rose faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, it flew to the mouth of the sky-devouring magic gourd and suddenly disappeared. Where is the ship? He made the ship disappear? Oh my god! Is he a god? Or an alien? Someone exclaimed in a cold sweat. No, he is not a god or an alien. He is a demon. Sidonie is possessed. A bystander trembled. Run. The people on the shore finally came to their senses and fled in panic like rats running across the street. The team that was supposed to receive the hostages was suddenly in a mess. There were trampling accidents and a dozen people were killed in an instant. Quite a few people were squeezed and fell into the sea. Lying on the ground, they were trampled on by others. Cries, screams, curses and shouts filled the sky and connected together. The crew members and workers on the remaining ships were so frightened that they quickly jumped into the sea and swam to the shore. Rumble. The rest of the transport ships also left the water surface and rushed toward the sky-devouring magic gourd. Alert! Alert! All soldiers immediately enter combat positions. Helicopters and fighter jets take off. All armed forces of the port of Bordeaux fire immediately. The enemy has arrived at the port of Bordeaux. The enemy has arrived at the port of Bordeaux. On the dock, the shrill alarm sounded and the red police lights spun rapidly. Countless French soldiers were running around like headless flies. After Qin Yang's declaration, they had relaxed their vigilance. Especially when Sidonie's battleship had returned at full speed, they felt that the war was over. At this time they were caught off guard. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chapter 643. Whoosh! 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 6 northwest wind air-to-air missiles with long-tail fins emitted an ear-piercing screech as they shot toward Xianxia from all directions. Clatter. Subsequently, several rockets also shot out from the 68mm rocket launcher under the belly of the helicopter. With dazzling flames, they flew toward Xianxia. At the same time, the 12.7mm rapid-fire machine gun equipped on the helicopter rotated rapidly. The radish-sized bullets intertwined into a torrent-like firepower net and shrouded Xianxia. Trash. Xianxia snorted. With a flick of his finger, he casually threw out a few medium-sized fireball charms. Without stopping, he turned into a golden light and shot out. Whoosh. The moment Xianxia flicked his finger, a cold black light was shot out like a shooting star. It instantly broke the sound barrier, then the sound barrier, then the sound barrier, then the sound barrier, then the sound barrier. The black light refracted in a dazzling curve in the air and instantly pierced through the 4 Eurocopters. Boom. Rumble. Almost in the blink of an eye, the 4 Eurocopters turned into raging fireballs and exploded. The wreckage fell to the ground one after another. The medium-sized fireball charms that Xianxia casually threw out instantly exploded into several huge fireballs with a radius of hundreds of meters. The entire port of Bordeaux was ablaze. Everything was on fire. Even the steel melted. Everything fell into a sea of fire. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people were burned into charcoal and flying ash. People were crying and screaming everywhere. With Xianxia's current movement technique, he could easily blast out 2 or even 3 times the speed of sound. How amazing was his speed! In the blink of an eye, he had already pushed hundreds of kilometers away. Beside him, the Black Iron Shuttle and Xiao Hei's flying sword were flying and jumping, following closely. It was about 600 kilometers from the port of Bordeaux to Paris. With Xianxia's speed, it would take him more than half an hour to reach there. But at this time, the news of the battle at the port had already reached the Élysée Palace, President Xianxia and the officials of the Ministry of National Defense. In fact, in the Golden Hall on one side of the Élysée Palace, a grand celebration was being held. President Xianxia, senior cabinet officials, military representatives and many rich people, tycoons and celebrities celebrated the safe return of the hostages, the defeat of Sidonie without a fight and the great victory of the French Republic. President Xianxia's iron-fisted diplomacy this time will definitely attract the attention of the world. Such a thunderous strike and forceful use of troops shows the strength of the French Republic. The feats of the President and the Minister of Defense are quite similar to Napoleon's. Long live France! A group of rich and famous people, led by Mr. Nathan of the Rothschild family, surrounded President Xianxia. They were full of satisfaction, drinking and chatting merrily. This isn't my own merit. It's all thanks to everyone's support. The soldiers of the three armies are of one mind. President Xianxia was also smug. He raised his wine glass and smiled reservedly. To the glory of the great French Republic, let's drink to our heart's content. The perfect resolution of the hostage incident would greatly increase his popularity, and he might even be re-elected. At this moment Mr. Nathan smiled sinisterly and said, "Mr. President, Sidonie returning the hostages is indeed worthy of celebration, but it has caused us to miss the opportunity to get the rich magnetite in Mount Surad." President Xianxia said with a grave expression, "Yes, that's a pity. It's said that the reserves are very rich and can revitalize our steel industry. They kidnapped the hostages and killed many of the Black Skull Security Company's personnel. I think that's enough reason for us to use troops." Mr. Nathan's eyes were sharp as he said slowly, "Mr. Nathan is right." President Xianxia was overjoyed and said passionately, "Black Skull is registered in France and most of them are French, so our Marine Corps must continue to advance. Mr. Nathan, I would like to develop Sidonie's mines with you. You know that our family has a lot of experience." Immediately, the head of the Breton family, France's second largest family, came up to Nathan and toasted him, trying to get a share of the pie. "Mr. Nathan is really a sly old fox. This is a very good deal. His political contributions to Xianxia are no more than 1 or 200 million euros. But the profits, controlling the president and the cabinet, daring to start a war and destroy a small country, this is the Rothschild family. I'm afraid that once Nathan succeeds, the Rothschild family will be revitalized and even become the largest family in Europe, comparable to the Morgan and Rockefeller families in America." Seeing this, many of the super tycoons, rich people and celebrities looked at Nathan with admiration and envy. Some people couldn't hold back and went up to Mr. Nathan and toasted him with flattery and flattery. Even Raymond and the James brothers were highly regarded. Many socialites and young ladies deliberately approached them, and Raymond was very beautiful. "What bullshit Kong Techu. Compared to the Rothschild family, he's just an ant. There must be something wrong with Paris's brain. That's why she's on his side and trying to scare me." With his arm around the slender waist of a famous French female singer, Raymond shook his red wine glass complacently and thought with disdain. At this moment, the Navy commander hurried over with an ugly expression. He lowered his voice and whispered something in President Xianxia's ear. President Xianxia's hand suddenly trembled and spilled some red wine. His expression changed drastically and he said something to the Minister of Defense. The Minister of Defense also frowned and his face darkened. He then called a few generals and said a few words. Just like that, 1 passed to 2, 2 passed to 4, 4 passed to 10. After a while, the entire hall suddenly became dead silent. Because everyone heard a piece of news. The god of Sidonie, Kong Techu, has appeared and destroyed a few fighter jets. He's pushing in the direction of Paris. In an instant, everyone was stunned and could not believe it. Is the god of Sidonie real? He actually dares to invade France. I got some news from the dark web. I heard some things from intelligence dealers. The Rothschild family may not win this time. Everyone's expression was fearful as they whispered. There may be some small-scale military friction. Don't be nervous. The banquet will continue and the vice president will host it. President Xianxia forced a smile and left the Golden Hall quickly. He quickly went to a large conference room in the Élysée Palace and held an emergency meeting with the Ministry of Defense and the three armies. This is a military operation or a terrorist attack that has invaded France's territory. After listening to the report, President Xianxia was furious. He slammed the table and roared. I order kill Kong Techu at all costs. The Paris Theatre, the Northeast Theatre, the Southwest Theatre. The entire Paris Army and Air Force were mobilized. Rafale, Mirage 2000 fighter jets, and enemy destroyers roared into the sky and ferociously attacked Jiangtian. Jiangtian was flying at supersonic low altitude. And in modern weapons, It was almost impossible for supersonic and low altitude to coexist. For example, low-altitude aircraft such as helicopters were often very slow. And ground attacks against supersonic fighter jets were often unable to be carried out at low altitude. This also made many of France's emergency plans ineffective. In just half an hour, Xianxia had destroyed 3 military defense lines and pushed 200 miles. It wasn't until he flew over Le Mans and reached a sparsely populated mountain area that Xianxia encountered some decent resistance. Fighter jets took off from all directions and were less than 30 kilometers away from Xianxia. They began to attack from the air. More than a dozen Mika air-to-air missiles ejected dazzling tail fins and shot toward Xianxia. This model of missile weighed 110 kilograms and had a maximum speed of Mach 3. It was guided by 3 guidance technologies and was highly controllable and accurate. If more than a dozen air-to-air missiles exploded at the same time, it was equivalent to several tons of high explosives. The power was so terrifying that even an immortal state warrior would be blasted to pieces. What bullshit, God! Even if Kryptonian was here, he would be killed in one fell swoop. The pilots on the fighter jets were full of confidence and thought that killing an unidentified flying object was as easy as playing a game. Break. Xianxia didn't back off. Instead, he turned into a beam of light and charged forward. At the same time, he patted the small gourd on his waist. More than a dozen disposable flying swords whizzed through the air. The disposable flying swords turned into a beam of golden light and shot out in all directions, breaking the sound barrier. Twice the speed of sound. 3 times the speed. What is that? 3 times the speed of sound. Launch the missiles to intercept them. Interceptions are ineffective. Ineffective. They are coming. 100 kilometers away, the pilots on the Rafale fighter jets exclaimed. They looked at the radar screen as if they had seen a ghost. The missiles they fired exploded when they were still a dozen kilometers away from the target. They didn't hurt the enemy at all. Meanwhile, more than a dozen unidentified flying objects were flying toward them at a faster speed than the speed of sound. Get out of the way. All the pilots were scared out of their wits. They quickly twisted or stretched the joysticks. The fighter jet quickly rose into the air, or nimbly flipped like a sparrow hawk, or maneuvered like a snake, or somersaulted continuously, skillfully performing all sorts of evasive maneuvers. 3 of the Rafale fighter jets managed to dodge the attack by a hair's breadth. However, the other 7 Rafale and Mirage fighter jets weren't so lucky. Kaboom! Kaboom! Within a second, they all turned into earth-shattering fireballs. They were like huge fireworks, spanning hundreds of meters, dazzling and blooming in the night sky. Oh my God! Our fighter jets have exploded. There's a flying man in the sky. It's him. This is unbelievable. It should be the god of Sidonie that appeared at the port of Bordeaux. Oh my God. How can he be so fast? It's only been 10 minutes. He can take out a fighter jet. This is unbelievable. Oh my God, that idiot Xianxia, what kind of terrifying existence did he provoke? Many people in Limong City saw this scene. They all exclaimed and were dumbfounded as if they had seen a god. Chapter 644. What? Even the Rafale fighter jet was taken down by him? In the French command center, President Sanchi, the Minister of Defense, and many generals were stunned and could not believe it. The Rafale fighter jet developed by the French company Dassault was the trump card of the French army. The Rafale fighter jet had a wide-legged infrared sensor and a CCD camera. It was also equipped with a powerful BF-2 radar that could track 40 targets and intelligently analyze and strike the most dangerous targets. The Rafale was equipped with a 30mm cannon that could fire 2,500 rounds per minute. The Mika air-to-air missile could intelligently track electromagnetic and infrared signals and launch an attack. It could be said that the Rafale fighter jet was recognized as the king of the third-generation fighter jets. But now these ace mecha had been taken down so easily by one person. His strength has increased. He only had 1 flying sword before, but now he seems to have a lot more. An intelligence officer's face was paler than a corpse that had been dead for 3 days. He has indeed improved. A major general of the Air Force who had carefully studied Xianxia's information murmured with a dispirited face. According to our analysis before, when he was in Japan, it was a little difficult for him to take down helicopters with his flying sword. The speed of the flying sword could not exceed twice the speed of sound, but now it is obvious that he has achieved it. This was the result of an increase in strength. When he encountered the 28-man mixed brigade in Japan, Xianxia was still at the 5th level of Qi disciple. It was a little difficult for him to deal with ordinary cannons and howitzers with the Manjin Sogo, and he was seriously exhausted. And at that time, because of Qinger tilling her way into the cabinet, the other party did not send out the supersonic fighter jet. Presumably, if the other party had sent out the supersonic fighter jet, Jiang Tian would have been more passive. But now Jiang Tian had completed the 7th level of Qi disciple and was only a step away from the 8th level of Qi disciple. His strength was 10 times or 100 times stronger than before. At this time he could break 1, 2 and even 3 times the speed of sound. Coupled with the many flying swords, dealing with the supersonic fighter jet was like chopping vegetables. He is so strong. This is terrifying. President Sanchi's face was pale as he wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. For the first time he doubted whether his choice to fight to the death with Kong Teichu was a wise decision. After defeating this wave of fighter jets, Jiang Tian did not continue to fight. He released 3 disposable flying swords to kill the remaining 3 fishes that had escaped the net. At the same time he stepped into the air and his figure suddenly turned into a golden light that penetrated the heavens and the earth, continuing to rush toward Paris. Seeing Jiang Tian enter the shooting range, the few artillery anti-air regiments of Caesar that were stationed 30 kilometers away from Lumans opened fire at the same time after receiving the order. At this moment to Jiang Tian ordinary guns were completely useless. Jiang Tian was basically flying at an altitude of 1,000 meters. At this height the bullet had no more power. Only this kind of ace artillery force air defense regiment could cause some damage to Jiang Tian with modern artillery fire. Fire! The commander of the military base gave the order. The 155 mm self-propelled howitzers, TRF one-towed guns and self-propelled rocket launchers hidden behind the fortifications and bunkers opened fire at Jiang Tian. There were even soldiers carrying rocket launchers and firing at Jiang Tian. In an instant, thousands of cannons roared. The rain of fire cut through the night sky and covered Jiang Tian. There are hundreds of cannonballs. Even if Zeus was here he would be blown to pieces. The commander of the base was full of confidence as he watched the cannonballs on the screen fly toward the red dot that represented Jiang Tian. Open. Facing the dense artillery fire that blotted out the sky, Jiang Tian raised his eyebrows and suddenly pulled with both hands. He used the 1,000 gold sword technique. Whoosh. Hundreds of cannonballs instantly broke free from the guidance system's control. The warheads were deflected to the sides, allowing Jiang Tian to rush past. A huge crack appeared in the bullet screen. However, the cannonballs were controlled by Jiang Tian's secret technique. Without losing momentum, they exceeded the designed range and shot into Luman's city. Rumble. It was as if thousands of bright fireworks were blooming in the dark night sky. The white European-style building of Luman's city was instantly torn into ruins by the soaring explosion and fell into a sea of fire. The mayor, Jean Ran, and many other city officials were blown up to the point where not even ashes could be found. The reason why Jiang Tian showed no mercy was because the mayor had once said in an interview that he would fully support France's fight against Sidonie. He was willing to participate in the war at the front line and declared that he would adopt a policy of genocide against Sidonie. Oh my God, what's going on? The cannonballs didn't hurt him. Many commanders of the Kaiser Artillery Battalion looked at the figure in the sky that was getting closer and closer. They were so scared that their binoculars fell to the ground. The rain of bullets seems to have been torn apart. They have all shot into Luman City. How is this possible? Most of these cannonballs have a range of 10 kilometers. How can they be shot 30 kilometers away? He can't be a real god, right? Many soldiers were stunned as if they had seen a ghost. They forgot to fire and stood motionless like clay statues. These French idiots, what are you looking at? Don't you know to run when you can't beat me? In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian flew over the artillery battalion. He smiled disdainfully and patted the sky-devouring magic gourd at his waist. A transport ship floated out and was then activated by Jiang Tian's 1,000 gold sword technique. The transport ship, which weighed more than 1,000 tons, covered a large part of the night sky and the stars in the sky. It turned over and smashed toward the headquarters of the Kaiser Artillery Battalion like Mount Buzhou. This is the garbage transport ship of the New World? The commander of the station was shocked at first, then a trace of grief and despair appeared on his face. He said to himself with a dull look, we have offended the god Sidoni, and we have finally received our retribution. Boom. The transport ship, which weighed more than 1,000 tons, fell from a height of more than 1,000 meters. Its power was so terrifying that it was like a huge meteorite falling from the sky. Boom. The ground trembled and the transport ship rolled 2 kilometers like a bowling ball before coming to a stop. Be it the barracks, the fortifications or even the tanks and cannons, all of them were crushed to pieces under the crushing pressure. Then Zhang Tian threw out a few large fireball and thunder talismans. Suddenly the fire rose to the sky and lightning flashed. Clusters of fire with a radius of a few hundred meters or even 1,000 meters bloomed like a magnificent red flower. The headquarters and the entire military station were instantly turned into ruins. Less than 100 soldiers survived out of the 3,000 soldiers. Zhang Tian didn't even look at the survivors. He turned into a golden light again and rushed toward Paris. Even in World War II, the French Republic wouldn't be so vulnerable when facing the artillery fire of the German army. In the burning city of Le Mans, a retired veteran of World War II stood on the roof of a building and looked at the direction of the Kaiser Artillery Air Defense Regiment with an old-fashioned military telescope. 10 minutes. More than a dozen fighter jets and dozens of helicopters were shot down by Zhang Tian with disposable flying swords. 20 minutes later, Zhang Tian defeated the 8th line of defense. He destroyed hundreds of armored vehicles and tanks with thunder talismans and fireball talismans. Thousands of soldiers were killed. Half an hour later, Zhang Tian, like a super hurricane, defeated the 7th Armored Brigade stationed in the Southwest Theater of Operations and destroyed hundreds of cannons. This also announced that the French Army's defense line in the Southwest Theater of Operations had collapsed in 2 hours. Paris was close at hand. Sidoni's military has declared war. French Marine Corps fire at Sidoni immediately. When Zhang Tian began to attack the hinterland of France. The fleet of the French Marine Corps, which had arrived near the equator of the Pacific Ocean, received the order of the French Ministry of Defense to immediately launch a long-range military attack on Sidoni from the outer sea area. Boom, boom. Supersonic fighter jets instantly broke the sound barrier and flew toward Sidoni. Whoosh, whoosh. Cruise missiles, trailing orange flames, rose into the air from the surface warships and shot toward Black Africa, Sidoni, San Juan and other large cities. These cruise missiles were designed to have a range of more than 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers, and their accuracy was very high, with a hit error of less than 30 meters. The entire Marine Corps carried nearly 1,000 of these cruise missiles. What was more terrifying was that several of them carried nuclear warheads with the equivalent of 200,000 tons of TNT. And this time more than a dozen of them were launched, enough to cover the entire Sidoni. All the buildings in several large cities were razed to the ground and all the creatures were killed. There was no sign of life. Go! Zhang Qianlei, flying in the depths of the clouds, stepped on a flying sword, raised his eyebrows and took the lead. More than a dozen disposable flying swords broke through the air and flew toward the cruise missiles. Each flying sword interweaved a sea of thunder and lightning with a radius of a few kilometers in the sky. The sea of thunder and lightning was extremely hot, with a temperature of thousands of degrees in the core area. More importantly, the electromagnetic waves and radiation were powerful. As soon as the cruise missiles entered this area, the GPS system was immediately seriously disturbed and became like a headless fly, deviating from the fixed trajectory. When the French missiles entered the detection area of Sidoni's air defense radar, the Sky Army stationed in the North Bay area of Sidoni immediately intercepted them. Boom! Many Wuxia S-400 air defense missiles and Land Shield 730 close-range defense cannons fired at the same time. Instantly, missiles and artillery shells shot out of the muzzles, crossing the sky and covering the cruise missiles like dense raindrops. At the same time, air-to-air missiles with long tails were launched from dozens of J-8 fighter jets to intercept them. Many fighter jets and cruise missiles of the French Marine Corps exploded in the open sea 200 kilometers away from Sidoni's territory. Awesome. In a J-8 fighter jet, A blonde Sidoni Air Force fighter waved his fist excitedly and cheered. This group of air heroes was recruited from all over the world by the Sky Army. Among them there was no lack of ace pilots from the world's major military powers, no less than the French Air Force. Chapter 645. These cruise missiles are very advanced. They have compound guidance. In the command center of the Sky Military Force, Zhang Qing'an's face turned serious. This compound guidance is based on inertial guidance. Then through the terrain matching system the flight path is predetermined. During the flight, the GPS satellite navigation system will constantly adjust the course and finally find the predetermined target through digital image comparison. Zhang Qingzhen wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said with emotion, "Thanks to Mr. Zhang's long-range Thunder Talisman interference, we would not have intercepted them so smoothly. We would have definitely caused some casualties." Zhang Qianlei's Thunder Sea Strike is equivalent to digging out the eyes of these cruise missiles. Qingzhen, it seems that Dharma artifacts have a very bright future. Hu Qingtian next to him encouraged, "If your Kuelian system is developed, we will be even more powerful. We won't even be afraid of the United States. We are almost done with the research." Zhang Qingzhen smiled confidently and said, "The United States? If the Kuelian system is really put into use, we won't even be afraid of an alien invasion." However, there were still 2 French fighter jets that broke through the heavy interceptions and attacked Sidoni's North Bay area. These 2 French fighter jets were very sneaky. They flew at low altitudes at high speed to avoid Sidoni's military defenses and launched long-range attacks. Boom! They fired a few cannonballs at a military base. Suddenly, flames soared into the sky and dozens of people died. "I really can't let him down again." In the dense forest, Huang Linger, who was meditating cross-legged, suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the unscrupulous fighter jets in the sky. Her clear eyes burned with fighting spirit. "Kill!" A soft shout came out of her delicate red lips. Huang Linger suddenly stood up and used the divine withering art to its fullest. She waved the heavenly source wooden staff. Swoosh! The primeval forest within a 10-kilometer radius trembled. A green aura filled the air like the rising clouds. It was very beautiful. A jade-green vine condensed in the air. It was crystal clear and beautiful like a jade sculpture. However, its lethality was amazing. The green vine shot out more than 10 kilometers in the blink of an eye and pierced through the 2 fighter jets. "I hit him." Looking at the flames in the sky, Huang Linger happily waved her fists and jumped up and down. But in the next moment her delicate body trembled slightly. Her face was filled with pain and blood actually seeped out of her mouth. Her divine art of withering glory was a mid-range attack technique. Attacking from such a distance was too taxing on her. She couldn't bear it and her meridians were damaged. What? The cruise missile missed? All the fighter jets have crashed. Sidoni's air defense is so powerful. How is this possible? On the ships of the French Marine Corps, many commanders and soldiers exclaimed in exasperation when they were about to launch a second attack. "Why aren't you kneeling and begging for mercy? Your Master Thousand Thunder is here." Suddenly there was a burst of wild laughter. Like a thunderclap, a green flowing light shot over. His wild laughter shook the heavens and the earth, causing everyone's ears to rumble. The azure light hovered in the air, revealing its true appearance. It was Zhang Qianlei with many flying swords on his back. Without another word, this fellow urged in his mind. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Disposable flying swords flew out in all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers. These disposable flying swords could break the sound barrier. In fact, many of the close-range defense cannons and anti-air missiles could be destroyed. But the key was that these flying swords could make strange movements that were even more terrifying than anti-ship missiles. Many ships activated many anti-missile systems, anti-air missiles and close-range defense cannons, but it was useless. The disposable flying swords easily dodged them. In an instant they were plunged into a sea of lightning and fire. In just a short minute, the command systems of many ships were electrocuted until black smoke billowed and all of them collapsed. Many ships floated on the sea like dead fish that had lost their lives, unable to move at all. Zhang Qianlei laughed and jumped onto the deck of the leading ship. This fellow swaggered all the way as if he had entered an uninhabited land. He roared loudly, "Where is the commander? Your fleet has been taken over by me." He flaunted his power and was extremely smug. "Hurry up and give me a plate of foie gras or caviar or something. Don't you French people like this?" God, it must be a god. Sidonie really has a god. This made Paul and the other French marine elites look at him with their mouths agape, their hearts filled with horror. A monster that could fly in the air, break the sound barrier, and throw thunder-spewing swords with a raise of his hand. What else could it be if not a god? All of this had long exceeded their scope of understanding. Could only be explained by supernatural power. Many of the French marine elites instantly gave up resistance. They obediently threw away their weapons and stood against the wall. They did not dare to breathe loudly or move at all. Even if they were fierce people who had walked out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. At this moment, in the face of this supernatural power, they were scared out of their wits and shivered all over. The soldier with the tattoo on his arm was so scared that he wet his pants and could not stand still. "Master Taoist wants to eat French food. Don't you understand Wuxia language?" Seeing that they looked at each other and ignored him, Zhang Qianlei was very unhappy. "Barbarians! You deserve to die." He frowned and without saying a word, the second-generation flying sword flew out. The flying sword flew across the sky and made a strange sound. Blood gushed out like a tide and a dozen people, including Paul, were beheaded in the blink of an eye. "Your Excellency Sidonie, I am the Commander-in-Chief of the Marine Corps, Olivier. I know Chinese." At this time, looking at the bodies on the ground, the Commander-in-Chief of the Marine Corps could no longer control the fear in his heart. He walked out of the cabin and came to the deck. He stepped forward and bowed deeply. He lowered his head and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Please don't kill us, God. We have a lot of caviar. Please feel free to enjoy." In the age of the mobile internet, there was no paper that could cover fire. There were many witnesses of the war in the hinterland of France, and the news quickly spread on the internet. "I heard that there was a military conflict between Sidonie's armed forces and us in the port of Bordeaux. Have you heard?" Someone asked on the internet. "It's true. My lover went to meet the hostages and is now missing. I'm so worried. Oh my God. There's a sea of fire and so many corpses. I'm afraid thousands of people have died. It's a mess. It's like hell on earth." That's too despicable. The despicable black devils and yellow monkeys even shot down the military helicopters. "I'm at the scene. God Sidonie has appeared. He can make more than 10 large transport ships disappear." First, the citizens near the port of Bordeaux spread many photos and news on the internet. "What God? That's impossible." At the beginning, the people of France thought that this was a regular battlefield and did not believe in the legends of God. They were filled with righteous indignation and clamored to capture Sidonie and turn them into France's colonies. They wanted to turn the black devils and yellow monkeys into their slaves. But at this time, even more shocking and terrifying news came. "Did you see that? I think I saw many fighter jets take off and heard explosions." Yes, the Le Mans government building was bombarded by many cannonballs and turned into ruins. How is that possible? Sidonie's black devils still have the ability to attack the hinterland of France? That's right, but it seems like the French did it themselves. To be precise, it was the Kaiser Artillery Battalion. Our own people fighting their own people, this is too ridiculous. Then many netizens followed up in Angers, Le Mans and other cities where Zhang Tian had fought. When Zhang Tian pushed toward Paris, he was thousands of meters in the sky. It was also nighttime, so many people could not see clearly. They could only see a golden light. For a moment, many people did not realize that this was the action of one person and thought that it was a large-scale war. But everyone knew that there was a war in France. Soon after, even more shocking videos and photos began to spread on the internet. The 8th line of defense was destroyed. I saw a garbage ship fall from thousands of meters in the sky. Watch the video if you don't believe me. This video was very clear. Deep in the clouds, a large garbage ship fell and then the earth shook. Oh my God. This transport ship must weigh 1,000 tons. How could it fall? How is this possible? What's above the garbage ship? It looks like a golden figure. The transport ship is a ship from the New World. Could it be that God Sidonie is returning it to us in this way? It can't be a god, right? That golden light might be artillery fire. At first some people did not believe it. The Kaiser Air Defense Artillery Regiment's position has collapsed. The 7th Armored Brigade station has been destroyed. I only saw one person and he can fly. I saw it too. That's God Sidoni. But gradually more and more video clips were released. Could it be true? Could it be that aliens are attacking Earth? Everyone stared at the screen in disbelief. The entire Southwest Theater is full of explosions and seas of fire. All the military bases of the Army and Air Force have been destroyed. It was destroyed by one person. Sidoni's military strength can't be so strong. My God, could it be that God Sidoni really exists? When the news spread, the whole of France fell into a deathly silence. Everyone was terrified. The Southwest Theater. That was the theater with the strongest defense in the entire France, except for the Paris Theater. In terms of equipment, individual quality and overall combat strength, it was famous all over the world. But now it was destroyed by God Sidoni or aliens. Guys, I heard that God Sidoni has really appeared. As long as we take photos of it, we will definitely win the Pulitzer Prize next year. Everyone, do your best. Go to the scene immediately. Levi, the head of the Reuters news agency in France, rushed into the office wearing slippers and striped pajamas. He excitedly slammed the table and shouted at the reporters. Chapter 646. Not only Reuters but soon, all the media around the world reacted and sent their war correspondents to the scene. Originally, the relationship between France and Sidoni was tense. All the media had already sent their correspondents or increased their editorial staff. However, after President Xianxia announced the return of the ship, everyone thought that the war would be over and they would have to return empty-handed. They were very disappointed. Suddenly the big news came out. All the correspondents in France were so excited that they almost jumped up. Suddenly, all the major TV stations and online stations around the world stopped their programs and broadcast related news. According to the latest news, Sidoni's military has suddenly declared war on France. Sidoni's military forces have landed at the port of Bordeaux, France, and are advancing rapidly toward Paris along the Angers and Le Mans line. Now, Sidoni's military forces have broken through 8 defense lines and destroyed many military bases. The exact situation of Sidoni's military forces is unknown. The BBC, Associated Press, CNN, and other major media around the world reported the news immediately. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all the major global portals opened special columns and paid close attention to the news. In an instant, the world was shocked. Countless eyes looked toward the Atlantic Ocean, Europe, and France. In the Western Hemisphere, everyone who was at home was staring at the scene of gunfire on TV. On the streets, pedestrians stopped and looked up at the big LCD screen on the outer wall. In the subway, people who were watching the news on their mobile phones suddenly screamed. In the Eastern Hemisphere, countless people who were sleeping were awakened by those who knew what was going on. They turned on the TV and watched with interest. Serves them right. France is a garbage country. It pollutes the environment and bullies the African people. Damn it. I don't have any sympathy for France. This is karma. However, when did Sidoni's military force become so powerful that it can even crush France? This doesn't make sense. The United States, Wuxia, Russia, Japan, many people who knew the cause and effect cursed France. Some were gloating, some were shocked, and some were confused. Meanwhile, the dark world was in an uproar. It was as if a ladle of cold water had been poured into a pot of hot oil. Kong Teichu has declared war on France. They have broken multiple defense lines and are about to attack Paris. The observer spoke. Zhang Qianlei, the Taoist master of the Republic of Wuxia, joined forces with Sidoni's Sky Army fleet to subdue the French Marine Fleet. The French Atlantic Fleet is here to help. The battle is still going on. Sidoni is a place of prosperity. The workers are working through the night to build a new country. Square dancing is very popular here. All of France's aerial military attacks have been intercepted. So far there have only been a few casualties. Seeing this news, all the experts of the Dark Association were shocked. They exclaimed and discussed it among themselves. France. They are one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. In terms of military strength, they are second only to the United States, Wuxia, and Russia. They are on par with the United Kingdom and can be called the fourth strongest military power. Good heavens! Kong Techu has made history by going to war with France and invading France. This must be the reason why Sidoni and Kong Techu issued a global recruitment order some time ago. Someone sighed. It turns out that he is really prepared to challenge the current world order. I really envy those experts who have joined Sidoni's army. I wonder if they are still recruiting? I want to join. Some experts scratched their heads. Tonight belongs to Kong Techu. He has made history. Many experts exclaimed in shock. They were extremely excited. They stared at the screen and searched for relevant news as if they were about to witness history. 2 hours later, Jiang Tian killed his way into the Paris war zone and arrived at Versailles, which was only 23 kilometers away from Paris. Jiang Tian ascended to the sky from the port of Bordeaux and destroyed 8 defense lines and more than a dozen military bases. He crossed 500 kilometers and killed his way there in only 2 hours. But these 2 hours were enough to be recorded in history. At this time, the entire Élysée Palace, the Ministry of National Defense, and the headquarters of the various military regions were in a mess. The phones connected to the front line rang one after another. There was no time to answer. Information officers had to shout until their throats were broken to let their commanders hear their voices. Many cabinet members and generals were trembling. Their faces were pale as if they had lost their parents. Oh my God! He is only 20 kilometers away from Paris. The Paris war zone commander's eyes were red as he stared at the red dot representing Jiang Tian on the green screen connected to the satellite. His face was so solemn that it seemed as if water was about to drip out. The Marine fleet has been completely controlled by the enemy. We have lost contact. The Atlantic fleet was accurately hit by a weapon similar to an electromagnetic cannon. Yes, except for the satellite phone, all other communication devices were destroyed. We have lost command. A Navy general reported in a panic. 3 of our Air Force bases were destroyed. Hundreds of fighter jets and helicopters were destroyed. According to witnesses, it was a woman. Only one person. A major general of the Air Force was pale and couldn't even stand properly. How can this be? Is what the British said true? Is there really a god in Sidoni? President Xianxia no longer had any arrogance. His face was paler than a corpse that had been dead for 3 days. He trembled and was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Mr. President, this is a moment of life and death for the French Republic. I request authorization to use ground-penetrating missiles, intercontinental missiles and other heavy weapons. And nuclear weapons. Defense Minister David's body was as straight as a sword as he slammed the table. Flames of anger shot out from his eyes like a ferocious tiger choosing its prey. But he is very close to Paris. A nuclear explosion is out of the question. President Xianxia was a little confused as he stammered. Mr. President, we have no better choice. David said with a solemn expression. This attack is no less than World War II. If we don't kill this dictator, we may become slaves of a subjugated country. At this moment, an information officer walked over quickly and said, the director of British MI6, John Sowers, and Ms. Hera from the Palace of Gods have come to visit. They hope that the French army will temporarily cease fire. They will cooperate with us to persuade Kong Techu. Okay, let them go. We will cease fire. All conditions can be negotiated. President Xianxia said loudly. How can the French Republic bow down? In our history there was a strong man like Napoleon and a brave man like Charles de Gaulle. Even in the face of Hitler we were not afraid. But no. Defense Minister David sighed and shook his head in disappointment. He was very disappointed with President Xianxia's cowardice. The information officer had not left yet. He looked at President Xianxia and the defense minister as if he was waiting for something. Oh right, it's Sidoni who is going to war with us. How can only the British come forward and not our representative? President Xianxia suddenly came to a realization. He suddenly turned to David and smiled. Minister David, you are a professional soldier who has been on the battlefield for a long time. You are also the person in charge of our national defense. Only you are qualified to be the negotiator. Ah, my stomach suddenly hurts. It seems that I ate too much seafood at the banquet. I need to go to the bathroom. Minister David was suddenly stunned. Then he held his stomach, his face covered in cold sweat, and said in pain. Minister, your acting skills are too good. Could it be that your impassioned and fearless attitude was all an act? We're not asking you to go to the battlefield but to negotiate. Many generals, staff officers and high-ranking cabinet officials were speechless. That's not a problem. President Xianxia was very considerate. He waved his hand and said, I think your pained expression is just the right expression to express the suffering we are now talking about. Orderlies, bring Minister David adult diapers. The entire Paris theater suddenly stopped firing and shouted to Zhang Tian in Chinese, French and English. Honorable Kong Tetu, how have you been? Just as Zhang Tian was confused, a holy light suddenly pierced through the void and flew out from the city of Paris. Hera, it's you? Does the Palace of Gods also want to get involved? Zhang Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he said coldly, You sent a message to Sidonie before that the other European countries will not participate in the war. The person who came was one of the 12 main gods of the Palace of Gods, Queen of Heaven Hera. She stood proudly in the void, filled with a holy light. Her jade face was radiant, and her temperament was otherworldly. Her medieval robe with golden edges made her look graceful and luxurious. No, I'm just here to pass on a message from the French government. France requests to stop the war. Hera stood in the void and bowed slightly, her face full of wariness. Hera, you're here to be a lobbyist for France? A hint of contempt appeared at the corner of Zhang Tian's mouth. Some people were only willing to come to the negotiating table after being beaten up. Honorable Kong Techu, in fact, England and the Palace of Gods have always wanted to stop this war, but clearly France has overestimated their strength. Hera sighed helplessly. In fact, the reason why the Palace of Gods had warned France before was because they did not want to expose the existence of godly state experts to the secular world, not because they thought France would lose. Hera also did not expect the current situation of the battle. Zhang Tian was simply crushing them like rotten wood. She was shocked and horrified to find that Zhang Tian's cultivation was constantly increasing and becoming stronger. If you want to negotiate, sure. Where are the French negotiators? Zhang Tian said lightly. Mr. David, the French Minister of Defense, and many cabinet members have already arrived at a military base outside Paris. The negotiations can be held there. Hera bowed slightly and said, Very well, lead the way. Zhang Tian smiled faintly. Honorable sir, please follow me. Hera turned into a beam of holy light and flew toward a military base in the distance. Zhang Tian followed leisurely. It was more appropriate to call this military base a camp. It was a flintlock cavalry armored division under the 3rd Mechanized Brigade, and it was also an elite division in the outer defense line of Paris. Why did you declare a ceasefire? How can we bow down to Sidonie's army? No, I heard that it wasn't the army that attacked us. A god appeared in Sidonie and destroyed all our defenses. Just as the soldiers in the camp were discussing spiritedly. In the night sky, a dazzling golden light that was hundreds of meters long shot down like a sharp golden knife that was about to split open the sky. Chapter 647. This golden light was like a long golden rainbow that soared through the sky. A terrifying aura was emitted, which encapsulated the entire camp like a mountain. He's here. Is he really a deity? Seeing this scene, the military powerhouses exclaimed. They couldn't even hold their guns properly, as if they had seen a ghost. Boom. The golden light blasted into the sky above the camp and paused slightly. Then the golden light faded, and a young man with a dignified appearance suddenly appeared. His black hair fluttered like a waterfall, and he stood in the air with his hands behind his back. His white robe was spotless. Zhang Tian had pushed through 500 miles, broken through 8 defense lines in 2 war zones and killed thousands of people, but his robe was not damaged at all. Where's the negotiator? Come out. Zhang Tian was like a deity who stood high above the heavens, looking down on all living beings. Everyone was afraid of him. Your Excellency Kong Techu, I'm the negotiator for France. The French Defense Minister, David, accompanied by the director of the British MI6, John, had fearful eyes and trembling. He suppressed the fear in his heart and quickly greeted him. Zhang Tian floated down and swaggered over under Hera's accompaniment. Is this the deity Sidonie who defeated our army of tens of thousands? He's here. All the soldiers were frightened as they watched Zhang Tian walk over. They were as silent as cicadas in winter and didn't dare to breathe loudly. When Jiang Tian passed by, some soldiers even saluted subconsciously as if they were seeing their leader. Your Excellency Kong Techu, France didn't mean to offend you. After coming to a hall, David bowed deeply and said with a sad face, "This is all a misunderstanding. We want to stop the war." Misunderstanding? A delicate voice came. Qing'er, who had received Jiang Tian's message, met up with Jiang Tian and walked into the barracks. She glanced at everyone and said coldly, "Your country's garbage ship killed people in Sidonie." This is. David was shocked. David was terrified. Could it be the woman who destroyed so many Air Force bases? This must be Mr. Zhang's wife, Madame Zhao Xueqing. Hera laughed bitterly. To Kong Techu, he probably couldn't be bothered to talk to this bunch of trash and ants, so he called his wife over. "Oh, so it's Madame Zhao. Excuse me." Minister David bowed deeply to Zhao Xueqing, then said with a bitter smile, "You are all honorable super experts. Why would you offend France over the death of a few Sidonie blacks? You've killed nearly 10,000 people and destroyed 7 to 8 lines of defense in 2 war zones, as well as the Marine Corps and the Atlantic Fleet. This has caused serious damage to France. Can be considered a disaster. Sidonie is a country under our control. It's our territory," Zhao Xueqing said firmly. "Anyone who kills a person or even a dog will have to take responsibility and pay the price. Anyone, even a real god, as long as they kill a Sidonian, will chase them to the ends of the earth and take their lives." David looked at Zhao Xueqing and Jiang Tian's cold eyes and his heart trembled. This woman's strength was almost crazy. Being weak wasn't scary. However, being weak and cowardly was scary. It would often bring disaster to a country. And now, this small African country might really rise to power. "Then what do you want?" Minister David asked. "Confess. Apologize. Compensate. Hand over the people." Zhao Xueqing's face darkened. "France wants to pay compensation to Sidonie for the pollution of the Gulf of Tonkin. I want $2 trillion or equivalent in gold reserves. Over the years, the mercenaries of the New World have killed 32 civilians of Sidonie. I want the Rothschild family to pay with their lives. I want the culprits, Nathan, Raymond, and the rest of Sidonie to face trial. I want them to pay with their lives. At least 32 of them must be hanged." "Ms. Zhao, that's impossible. Our GDP in 2009 was only $2.9 trillion. Our gold and foreign reserves added up to only a little over $100 billion. An official from the finance department screamed. "It's against international law to let Sidonie put the Rothschild family on trial. He's a French citizen. Only we can put him on trial." Someone said seriously. "Maybe you don't understand the situation of this war." Zhao Xueqing smiled coldly and said, "You are destined to be a defeated country. You have no right to bargain. You don't agree? Then let's continue the war." "Mr. Jiang, does this represent your opinion?" Among the French negotiators, a silver-haired old man with a graceful temperament stood up and straightened his back. With a simple movement, he suddenly exuded a powerful aura. "We still have intercontinental missiles and depleted uranium bombs, nuclear bombs and aircraft carriers that we haven't used. We still have hundreds of thousands of soldiers." Hera and the director of MI6 looked at the old man in shock and awe. This man was the former Prime Minister of France and was now the President of the Senate. He was the real representative of the Hawk faction and the real power. He had a lot of influence in France. Even President Sanchi had to be courteous when he saw him. The president bent his middle finger and tapped on the table slowly. He said in a cold voice, "You know Wuxia's doctrine of speed. You caught France off guard and achieved a partial victory. But you should also know that France's military and national power is far stronger than Sidonie's. If it's a protracted war, we might not lose. Besides, France has the support of the European Union. How long can a small African country last? If you're confident, then let's fight." Zhao Xueqing smiled indifferently. "If we fight, our hundreds of intercontinental missiles will raze Sidonie to the ground." The president showed the true demeanor of a hawk. His eyes were cold and his temperament was extremely intimidating. "Do you really want to see hundreds of thousands of people in Sidonie die? I heard that your family and friends are there. Then we'll bury 60 million people in France. Zhou Xian said expressionlessly, I'm not afraid of you, and Sidoni's people will not hesitate to die. Today I'm fighting for Sidoni. In the future the 600,000 people of Sidoni will also fight for me. Anyone, any organization, any country that offends Sidoni's people will be attacked with the power of the country. Even if the price is a war across the country, even if all 600,000 people die in battle and rivers of blood flow, we will not hesitate. Very well, I now announce that the negotiations are over. Let's continue to fight. The president of the Senate was furious. He slammed the table and shouted angrily. Minister David was silent for a moment. In the end he could only nod and say, We support Mr. President's opinion. Mr. President, I've already reminded you that the British military will not send reinforcements. Seeing this, John, the director of the British MI6, slammed the table and roared, France is facing a catastrophe. You will regret today's decision. The president turned to look at him coldly. The Republic of France will never surrender. His conditions are too harsh. $2 trillion, that's equivalent to 50 years of France's military expenditure. Instead of giving it to the enemy to buy weapons to deal with us, we might as well use them to deal with the enemy directly. Hera smiled miserably, her face full of sorrow. Sir Speaker, conventional weapons, even nuclear weapons, may be useless against him. My wife completely represents my opinion. But I have to add one more thing. At this moment, Jiang Tian stood up lazily. He hugged Zhou Xian's slender waist and said calmly, My wife is gentle and merciful. She doesn't want to kill. She has always tried to resolve all kinds of disputes peacefully. Now let me answer the question of why we started this war. Actually, the Gulf of Tonkin incident is also an excuse. There's no reason to go to war. What did you say? The president was slightly stunned and confused. Jiang Tian walked toward the door of the hall and smiled arrogantly. I said, what does destroying you have to do with you? Hearing this, everyone felt a chill down their spines. Their eyes were filled with fear. Jiang Tian's domineering aura made it difficult for them to breathe. It was as if their hearts had stopped. You? The president was slightly stunned, as if he had been greatly humiliated. He slammed the table angrily and roared, You have no idea how many nuclear weapons we have, how many sophisticated weapons we have. We will teach you a lesson. We will attack Sidoni. We will force you to stop the war. Noisy. Jiang Tian didn't even turn his head. He just waved his hand casually. With a smack, the president was smashed into a pile of meat paste. The entire hall was dead silent. Everyone was trembling and dumbfounded. No one dared to say a word. Even the head of the British MI6, John, was trembling as if he had seen a ghost. One of the most powerful people in France, the former president, was killed by Kang Taichu with one slap? Mr. Jiang, really? Hera shook her head speechlessly. She had never seen such a powerful and ruthless person in 200 years. Today I will make all of France, all of Europe, and the whole world tremble before me. Ignoring everyone's shocked and terrified expressions, Jiang Tian and Zhou Xian left the barracks, stepped into the air, and turned into two streaks of light that immediately charged toward Paris. This time Jiang Tian exerted his cultivation to the limit. Like a hot knife through butter, he instantly broke through the last few lines of defense. Minister David, we have to attack Sidoni. Kang Taichu has gone crazy. He's about to attack Paris. A senior staff officer roared. Defense Minister David pondered for a moment and finally gave the order. After receiving the order, dozens of intercontinental cruise missiles were launched from the French Northwest Theater of Operations and the Paris Theater of Operations, leaving a dazzling trail of flames behind them. They shot towards San Juan, the capital of Sidoni, at a super high speed of Mach 3. The missiles streaked across the sky and flew over 1,000 kilometers to the Atlantic Ocean. In a dozen minutes they would reach Sidoni's territory. Such intercontinental cruise missiles were equipped with a large number of high explosives and even nuclear warheads. They were called the King of Destruction. The missiles were 20 meters long and weighed a few tons. They could carry 10 nuclear warheads, and each nuclear warhead was equivalent to 20 tons of TNT. If they exploded in Sidoni's territory, they could turn the tiny country of Sidoni into a sea of fire. The entire country would be scorched and turned into a living hell. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.